And before I call on our committee secretary, let me recognize the presence of Senator Amy Marcos, all the way from Ilocos Norte. Bago na ho yung kanyang background, it's the windmills, signifying her support to renewable energy. She's there earlier, but I think she just stepped out for a while. So we'll now recognize the committee secretary to acknowledge our resource persons for today.
Good morning. I'd like to acknowledge the virtual presence of our resource persons for today's public hearing. From the Department of Energy, Assistant Secretary Leonilo Pulido. From the Energy Regulatory Commission, Attorney Chara Angela Blanco, and Mr. Jason Briones. From the Philippine National Oil Company, Admiral Ruben Vista, and Attorney Ronald Chua, with Mr. Eduardo Manialac, former PNOC President, and from the Securities and Exchange Commission, Attorney Gail Rose Egar, from the Philippine Competition Commission, Attorney Cristina Faye Condes de Sagun, from Shell Philippines Exploration, Mr. Don Paulino, from Chevron Malampaya, UC 38, Ms. Belinda Racela, from Udena Holdings, Ms. Maria Teresa Loresco, from First Gen Corporation, Mr. Jerome Cainglet, from SMC Global Power Holdings Corporation, Mr. Jose Ferlino Raimundo, from Management Association of the Philippines, Mr. Ernesto Pantanco, and from Citizen Watch Philippines, Mr. Orlando Oxales. Everyone has been recognized.
Thank you, Comsec. Thank you very much. Today we'll be tackling Senate Bill or Senate Resolution 533. And the title of the resolution, a resolution directing the Senate Committee on Energy to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the issues surrounding Service Contract 38 or the Malampaya Deepwater Gas to Power Project in its compliance with Presidential Decree number 87, otherwise known as the Oil Exploration and Development Act of 1972, with the end in view of safeguarding the country's energy security. So it's self-explanatory, and this is authored by or introduced by Senate President Vicente Soto, Senator Ping Lacson, and yours truly. With that, let me just give you a brief context of this resolution. I know that everyone is a participant and a stakeholder in the oil and gas industry. I know everyone here in this hearing has some form of experience or participation in oil and gas. So Malampaya is not alien to most of us, no? And we all know that Malampaya is the single most important discovery of our country. Probably next to that importance is the discovery of the Philippines itself by Ferdinand Magellan in 1521. So Malampaya, as we all know, has contributed greatly in the development of our country. And let me just share with everyone the significance of Malampaya. Malampaya powers about 6.3 million homes here in our country. And it's about 21% of the generation mix. So meaning all of the electricity that comes out of our country, 21% comes from Malampaya. That means 1 out of every 4 homes, almost 4 homes, the electricity comes from Malampaya. It powers up 5 power plants with a combined capacity of 3,211 megawatt capacity. And it's also very clean. No? If you look at the emissions generated by nat gas compared to coal, it's significantly lower. It's not only clean, it's also cheap at this time, no? Because of its abundance and also low global demand. Compared to coal, nat gas is about 3.5 pesos per kilowatt hour. Coal at this time is about 4.2 pesos per kilowatt hour. One of the most important contributions of Malampaya is to our national coffers. It contributes about it contributed 311 billion pesos from the onset to date. That's an average of 17 billion pesos to our national coffers every year. So without a doubt, Malampaya is a very important energy source for our country. And um, because of its indigenous, this is also a very important feature for the nation because we don't have to import coal or import diesel to power up our power plants. It's from our own resource, so we save a lot of dollars in terms of importation. So, having said that, the objective of our hearing today is to make sure that the contributions of Malampaya will be sustained no matter what, especially assuring our household that they will have electricity 24/7, and not only electricity, but cheap electricity delivered to their homes. So there's no doubt that um, energy security is imbued in Malampaya. That's why in today's hearing, we want to know, number one, the current state of Malampaya. Number two, the future of Malampaya. And number three, the transactions surrounding Malampaya, whether it will affect energy security and also the delivery of electricity to our homes. Again, as a consumer of this country, it's important for me to learn, to know that electricity will be delivered to our homes. And it's important for me to know that all of these transactions surrounding Malampay will not affect the energy security of our country. So with that statement, we'll now go into the hearing proper. But let me just call on Senator Amy Marcos if she has any opening statement.
No, thank you. I'm here, Apo Chairman. I think your resolution is thorough and comprehensive. So we're here to learn. All our questions are contained in the resolution more than adequately. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Amy. With that, we will start off with a briefing from the Department of Energy, represented by ASEC Polido and Yusek Marcos. Yusek Marcos is the darker brother or the long lost brother of Senator Amy Marcos. But we would like to start off from any of the gentlemen from the Department of Energy, the significance of Malampaya, of course, to our country. I stated some fast facts earlier, but it's good to hear the current state of Malampaya right now and its significance to our country. And then later on, we will go into the a flurry of transactions surrounding Malampaya, because this affects, obviously, the energy security situation of our country. So we turn over the microphone to either ASEC Pulido or Yusek Marcos on the current state and significance of Malampaya to our nation. And let me also recognize the presence of Senator Ping Lacson, who's one of the authors of this resolution.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Lacson, any opening statement po? Senator Lacson, any opening statement?
I have none, thank you. I'll listen to the presentation. Thank you.
So with that, we turn over the microphone to Department of Energy.
Good morning, distinguished Chairman, the Committee of Energy and Senate, Senator Bin Gatchalian.
Yusek Marcos, I think Yusek Marcos, I think there are other devices that are on or turned on in your office. Please, please turn them off or turn to yan, mute them na lang. Yan.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning po, Senator Win Gatchalian, Madam Senator Amy Marcos, Senator
Yusek Marcos, again, there are some devices that are on. Turn the microphones off or turn the mute on. Yan. Feedback po eh. Yusek Marcos, are there other devices in your office?
Nakamute na po kami lahat dito. Ako na lang po ang
I'm sure it's not me, Mr. Chairman.
okay na po, Mr. Chair.
Yan, much better.
Chair.
Much better. Yeah,
I'm
much
heard
better.
clearly.
Yusek Marcos, we can hear you now clearly.
Mr. Chair, good morning. Am I heard clearly po?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, Yusek.
Again, good morning po, Honorable Chair of the Senate Committee on Energy, Chairman Senator Win Gatchalian, Madam Senator Amy Marcos, Senator Ping Lacson, distinguished resource speakers, DOE family, and attached agency that are with here to me now. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning po. Thank you very much for this very fortune time na madinig din po ninyo at we agree na lahat ng kanina pong sinabi ni Senator Win ay really of great importance po. That's why we're on the same boat addressing kung ano man po ang mga kinakailangan i-address. And with that, may I humbly request po to that ASEC body will be recognized for a short presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and to the honorable senators present at the if we may proceed, Mr. Chair, please submit the presentation to or do we proceed with sharing on our screen?
You can proceed with your presentation, ASEC.
May we know, Mr. Chair, if it's there, you can see it on the screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Mr. Chair, thank you for allowing us to give a quick overview regarding service contract number 38, which is the service contract that covers the Malampaya field. We'd like to take this opportunity to give the Senate and our colleagues here in the energy sector a quick overview of SC38 and to discuss the topics that were part of the Senate Resolution number 533, which is to discuss the contract extension of SC38, to talk about its current and historical rate of production, to talk about the legal background and the legal things that we need to evaluate in whenever we approve or disapprove any transfer of any participating interest of any petroleum contract under PD 87, and at the same time to specifically discuss the transfer of the participating interest of Chevron Philippines to Udena Malampaya Philippines PTE LLTD. Service contract number 38, Mr. Chair and your honors, has an area covering around 86,000 hectares and it's located off the northwest of Palawan. It's partially located outside our archipelagic baselines and already within the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. Service contract number 38 is a consortium run by a consortium of 3 companies currently being operated by Shell Philippines Exploration, commonly known as SPEX. And the sharing or the ownership of the consortium is divided among SPEX, which has 45%, PNOC, which has 10%, and of course, Chevron LLC, which has another 45%. A 504-kilometer pipeline goes from the Malampaya infrastructure all the way to Batangas, which connects sends the natural gas from Palawan all the way to Batangas, which powers, as discussed earlier by the chairman, it powers 5 power plants running on natural gas, providing 3,200 megawatts of power, approximately about 23% of the Luzon grid. And so far, the production of Malampaya as of 2020 runs at about 2.3 trillion cubic feet of gas. Well, we also have condensate and oil that comes from Malampaya. We wanted to show for the appreciation of the committee and of our colleagues. When we talk about SC 38, the service contract number 38, most people usually just associate it with Malampaya, but in reality, there's about 11 prospects or fields of clay within the area, some of which are quite significant. Of this 11, the Department of Energy has consistently looked at Malampaya East, Ilok, the Nido clay, and the Linapakan clay. All of these fields have varying possibilities of success, which is a geological term that talks about the potential of each area. And each one has its own respective estimated potential volume of petroleum, whether in the form of natural gas, condensate, or oil. We'd like to give everyone a sense of what these are, just to give you an idea. For example, Malampaya East, which is one of the things that the Department of Energy has consistently looked at, it has an unrisked volume of gas of about 140 billion cubic feet. And this is one of the areas that we were hoping would be further developed within the service contract. So we'd like to move on and talk about one of the topics that was raised in resolution number 533, which was the contract extension of SC 38. As most of you are probably already aware, SC 38 was awarded way back in 1989. They were given a 10-year expiration period and then a subsequent 25-year period within which to develop SC 38's fields, which of course will end this 2024. Mr. Chair, we'd like to bring the attention of the committee and of the members of the Senate that the first letter that the Department of Energy formally received that was seeking for the contract extension of service contract number 38 occurred way back in July 2009. That letter requested for a 15-year extension from the Department of Energy. However, the then administration of the Department of Energy advised the consortium that it was quite premature. There were actually, I believe, another 2 or another 3 more letters that the consortium sent the Department of Energy over another 2 or 3 year period, again in 2010 and again in 2011. And the letter that they sent in 2011 prompted the then administration of the Department of Energy to create a team to start evaluating the remaining reserves of Malampaya. Now, you'd have to forgive us, Mr. Chair, Your Honors, that occurred way back. Currently, what is, I believe, more pressingly significant for us is the most recent request letter sent by the consortium, which was sent back in December 11, 2018, wherein they reiterated their earlier requests a decade ago for the extension of the service contract number 38. However, even before the Department of Energy, Mr. Chair, received that letter request, the Department of Energy, as early as 2016, had already started studying the Malampaya remaining reserves. And in fact, even prior to the request of specs, there were already recommendations being done, there were already evaluations being done by our Upstream Energy Bureau. And in order to facilitate the discussion of the extension, the contract extension, in October 2019, a negotiation team was created by Energy Secretary Husi that would face with or work with the consortium, the members of the consortium, to discuss the license extension. Most recently, in May 2020, we asked the consortium to submit a proposal for the extension. This proposal was necessary in our view in order so that the Department of Energy and the members of the consortium would have a common ground on which topics to discuss, so that the department could ensure that we could get the best terms for the national government. And so, after receiving that proposal, starting in August 2020, August 25 of 2020, the DOE and the members of the consortium began meeting, well, in person and virtually, in order to discuss the license extension. The first official meeting happened on September 8, 2020, and then there were virtual meetings. And of course, the technical working groups were created, and those technical working groups also met respectively with their assigned peers from the consortium. In discussing the extension, Mr. Chair and Your Honors, we were guided in 8 essential topics or 8 big topics that we believed encapsulated the major points that had to be discussed between the Department of Energy and the members of the consortium. This was to discuss the remaining Malampaya reserves, the bank gas, the opportunity development or the work program that would be necessary in order for the Department of Energy to evaluate their proposals, the split or the sharing between the government and the contractor, whoever that may be, the decommissioning and restoration, which is critical, the asset disposal, the price of the gas in the event of extension, and of course, their social performance in terms of social corporate responsibility, which is one of the things that are encapsulated in the agreements between the DOE and the consortium. It was also felt that in order to better understand the remaining gas reserves in Malampaya, the Department of Energy requested all 3 members of the consortium to submit their respective studies regarding the remaining reserves, which the consortium did comply with, and which are all being evaluated by the Department of Energy currently. Now, Mr. Chair, Your Honors, we'd like to emphasize that in between all of these events, the Department of Energy was very, very consistent with its position. And its position was that in any discussion regarding Malampaya, there has to be a submission of a drilling program for the production and retention area. This is in line with our mandate to ensure that the exploration activities in all of our service contracts, past, present, future, and current, are all properly maintained and are all properly performed. So this has been a consistent position of the Department of Energy and something that we have been requesting as well from the current members of the consortium. And precisely because of that, Mr. Chair, and because of a recent announcement made by the consortium, the operator, Shell Philippines or SPEX, they recently announced that they would be selling their stake in service contract number 38. And we believe that it's quite significant considering that SPEX is the operator of the service contract and of the Malampaya field. And therefore, what we did was we recommended a temporary or to hold temporarily, rather, the negotiations of the license extension until the consortium has submitted a 4-year work program that specifically contains their plans to drill within the retention area and within the appraisal area. So currently, with the extension being postponed, we'd like to discuss a little bit about the historical and the current rate of production of the Malampaya field. And we'd like to point out that in terms of the production of the Malampaya service contract, the production actually is quite dependent on the annual contracted quantity of the off-takers. And the off-takers are, of course, the 5 natural gas power plants and the Philippine Shell refinery. And of those 5 power plants, 3, Ilijan, Santa Rita, and San Lorenzo, do have a daily take-or-pay. And that take-or-pay, which is a provision in a contract that requires the off-taker to purchase a certified particular amount, our average is about 120 billion cubic feet of take-or-pay gas per year. And that, I believe that number might change because Philippine Shell has already informed the Department of Energy of its closure of their refinery. This is the historical production rate of Malampaya, and starting from 2001 up to the current year, the production rate ranges from about 120 billion cubic feet to about 155. That's the high of 155 billion cubic feet. As of December 2019, the Malampaya field has produced 2.3 trillion cubic feet of gas. And we come to the crux of the matter and why the negotiations for the contract extension is significant. We all know that being a conventional source of energy, it would someday run out, and that estimated run out period would occur sometime in the second quarter of 2027. And at the end of that second quarter, or that end of the period, we have asked the members of the consortium to give us their estimates and their data, and that estimates or the estimated ultimate recovery. If you look at the graph on your screens, on the right side would be the total recoverable reserve, which is the total life of the play or of the field, and it can go from either a low of 2.9 trillion cubic feet to as high as 3.1 trillion cubic feet. So, not being a very exact science, the estimate would probably fall between 2.9 trillion cubic feet and 3.1 trillion cubic feet. We'd like to also give a quick discussion regarding the legal procedures and the legal mandates regarding any transfer of any interest in any petroleum contract as provided for under PD 87. And pursuant to PD 87, a department circular was issued back in 2007, which provides the guidelines and procedures for the transfers and obligations of any rights under any petroleum service contract. And essentially, there are two key takeaways from the department circular. The first takeaway is that it provides the guidelines upon which the Department of Energy, either the technical capacity, the financial capacity, and the legal capacity of the transferee, is evaluated by the Department of Energy. And the second takeaway is that it has to be the recognized entity, which is the contract holder, that can endorse any such transfer and seek for any such approval from the Department of Energy. So we'd like to give Mr. Chair, the committee, and the members of this committee a quick narrative about the acquisition as far as the Department of Energy has been formally informed of the acquisition by the Udena Limited Liability Company of the shares of Chevron Malampaya LLC. So back in March 2020, a letter was received by the Department of Energy which informed us of the completion of the transfer of shares, which allegedly occurred on March 11, 2020. And then you will notice, Mr. Chair, that from March to August, there's actually, it just seems as if nothing happened, but between March and August, the Department of Energy endorsed this letter to our legal services, wherein our legal services had to determine whether or not such transfer would fall squarely within the ambit of the department circular that would require the Department of Energy's approval of the transfer. And our legal services held that it falls squarely within that department circular and should require an evaluation of the technical, legal, and financial capacity of the transferee so that the DOE may approve such transfer. So, Your Honor, and the reason why we had to refer that to our legal was because a cogent argument was raised, and one of the cogent arguments was Udena's purchase of Chevron constituted no change in the corporate personality of the consortium or of the member of Chevron as a member of the consortium, considering that Udena purchased the whole company or the shares of the whole company. However, after a discussion within the Department of Energy and with our legal services, it was felt that it still falls within the definition and the mandate of the Department Circular, end of PD 87. So in August 2020, the Department of Energy asked the operator specs to endorse or file a formal request for the approval of the transfer of the 45% participating interest of Chevron to Udena. And in August, also, Chevron asked for the Department of Energy endorsement for the change of their corporate name from Chevron Malampaya LLC to Udena LLC. Subsequently, Chevron also wrote a letter asking for the Department of Energy's approval for the transfer of their participating interest. And on October, the Department of Energy informed the consortium that for any request for approval, it is necessary that the operator, SPECS, as the authorized representative of the service contract, be the one to either endorse or ask for the approval of the transfer. And our most recent letter that we received was from SPECS, finally endorsing Chevron Malampaya's request in its earlier letter for the approval of the transfer of the shares. Mr. Chair, and to the honorable members of the committee, the acquisition of Chevron, of the Chevron Malampaya shares, is currently under evaluation by the Department of Energy to determine the technical, financial, and legal capacity of the transferee. So, Mr. Chair, if there's any other questions, the Department of Energy is ready and willing to answer any concerns or clarifications that the committee may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Your Honors.
Thank you, Sec. Pulido. Is there any questions from our senators before we continue?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ping?
Yes, I understand that the current production of Malampaya is at 300 to 350 million cubic feet per day. Is that correct? 300 to 350 million cubic feet per day. Is that a correct figure? That's the present production level?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And right now, government income is at more than 13 billion pesos per year. That's the income generated by the national government. Is that also correct?
Your Honor, it's 17 billion.
17 billion. So even more than 13 billion. And that constitutes 90%? Because Shell, I believe, owns only 10%. Tama po ba yun?
Shell owns 45%, Your Honor, of the consortium.
45%. So the 13 or 17 billion government income would constitute how many percent share sa production?
Mr. Chair, is the question about how much the share is of the national government?
In terms of revenues.
It would be
17
60% of the.
ilang percent? Yes.
It will be 60%, Your Honor, of the gross revenue.
60% of gross revenues, in compliance with the Constitution, of course. Are you at liberty to share with the committee kung magkano yung 45% ng Chevron ang binila ng Udena o Udena?
Mr. Chair, based on the documents that were submitted to the Department of Energy, it was purchased for $565 million, approximately. if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. Thank you for the information. That would be all for now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Amy, any questions?
For Chevron, not yet. I'll listen to the others, po.
Thank you, Senator Amy. Asek Pulido, I have some questions, no? And you made some very significant disclosures just today, no? So I just want to step back a bit and look at the macro point of view before we drill into some of the questions concerning the transaction. Asek, first of all, what is the law governing oil exploration in our country?
Your Honor, it would be Presidential Decree number 87.
And what is the law governing transfer of rights, selling of rights and interest? Which law governs that in terms of oil exploration?
Your Honor, it would, Mr. Chair, it would also be the same law. Section 11 of PT number 87 also provides for the requirement for the approval of any transfer of any participating interest under any petroleum service contract.
Okay. And I saw that in PD 87, and I do agree that PD 87, though it's a very old law executed by the father of Senator Amy Marcos during those times, because it was a mechanism for us to become energy independent and to become energy secure. And he recognized that the Philippines is blessed with a lot of resources in oil and gas. Hence, the creation of PD 87, which is a very comprehensive law. Until now, it's quite relevant, to the oil and gas sector. Having said that, Sec Pulido, what is the rationale why government needs to approve any transfer of rights, any purchase of rights, and obligations under PD 87? What is the logic for that?
Mr. Chair, the logic is that it's a very technical industry. The development and the exploration and the production of petroleum service contracts. It's a very technical, very difficult, it's an industry that requires a lot of expertise and a lot of experience. Considering, if you would consider, Mr. Chair, Malampaya is an offshore facility that's worth a lot of money. So it's critical for the national government to ensure that any potential transfer would be transferred to another entity that has a similar background and similar experience and similar capacity.
So in other words, any entity that would want to operate Malampaya should have the technical capability and the technical experience.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Legal, technical, and financial capability.
And how do DOE exercise its what is the process for DOE to determine the technical capability and advocacy of an operator or potential operator? What is the procedure for that? Sec Bodhi?
If I may, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
yes, Yusek Marcos.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We have an existing review and evaluation committee for this, specifically dedicated for this, which reviews comprehensively all the technical aspects on the work program that the company will be submitting. So we have technical experts on this. We have our personnel that are really expert on this. In regards to finance, we have the financial services that is also on top of this, and legal services. So all in all po, this review and evaluation committee is dedicated to review all the compliances of and submission of the work program and budget for the specific service contract.
And so in other words, before I become, for example, I'm interested to become a service contractor, I have to demonstrate and submit all my documents demonstrating my technical advocacy and capability to become a service contractor, and DOE will evaluate that.
Yes, sir. First, meron po tayong Philippine Conventional Energy Contracting Program wherein it's a 24/7 open competitive selection process. Magno-nominate po ang isang potential service contractor ng area, and then it has to be verified through an ITMS. Sa ITMS po namin, if there are some overlap on the area, then pag nagkaroon po sila ng clearance, they will apply for the area, and then it will be published. It will be published Sila po ang magpapapublish noon, and then it will be, pag pinablish po ito, open for challenge po ito, may mga schedule po on PCECP regarding all the steps to submit all these requirements po. And then a specific period of time after the publication, which is 60 days, bubuksan po yung mismong nag-nominate plus yung mga nag-challenge po na dapat po kumpleto sila in all the compliances, technical, legal, and financial po. And ang magre-review po nito is the Review and Evaluation Committee of the Philippine Upstream po of the PCECP po. So nakapalaw po doon yung kung sila, basta po dapat pasok sila sa legal. Kailangan po pasado sila sa legal bago po sila ma-qualified. Tapos doon po sa technical requirements, kasama po roon yung work plan and budget na siya po pinag-aaralan din ng mga expert namin kung technically viable and feasible po ba yung kanilang approach. At siyempre po, will it be advantageous to the government? And of course, yung pong technical and work program nila can be supported po better financially by the company. So may mga validation din po, verification sa bangko at sa lahat ng mga financial institution na ilalagay nila doon sa kanilang credentials po, sa kanilang pre-qualification.
Thank you, Yusek Marcos. Senator Marcos?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if you allow me to interject, I had a question. Since we're very concerned about technical capacity, if the SPEX leaves the consortium, what happens to the operation of Malampaya? Can we confidently state that the remaining stakeholders, PNOC, EC, and Udena, will be able to operate the site? Will we have a continuation of innovation, technical advancements in the oil industry? What is the background of Udena and their experience in this realm?
Madam Senator, at the moment po, under evaluation po yan po. Pero po, definitely po, pag ang Shell ay sinailing kanilang share, it is the whole specs, the whole company po. Kasama po rito yung expertise nila, yung assets management nila, plus yung safety procedures nila. So embodied po sa sale dapat yung pati technical expertise, yung nga po sa asset management, saka yung of course yung kanilang buong share as 45% po.
Pero Yusek, kasi yung pagkaintindi ko, tapos na yung sale di ba? Kasi may presyo na binigay ninyo kay Senator Lacson. So tapos na yung sale.
Yes po, pero under evaluation po yun ngayon po, ma'am. Of
Pero
course,
may pera na may amount na
Opo, yun po kasing sale, it was given na nabigyan po ng consent ito by the two members of the consortium. Then after given this consent po, yun po ang magdadaan sa amin for review and evaluation. So nandun po kami sa process na yun ngayon.
Pero nauna yung bayaran kesa sa yung approval required by Section 11?
Mr. Chair, if I may po.
Yes, asset body, you explained that it was a completed sale. For all intents and purposes, completed sale. Why are we unclear regarding the technical capacity and the turnover of expertise, of safety protocols, of asset management? Bakit malabo pa yung terms of sale samantalang may halaga na at nagkabayaran na? Di ba dapat kaliwaan yan?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Asek.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So, ma'am, Your Honor, the sale, we at least as far as the Department of Energy is concerned, the sale of the shares from Chevron Malampaya LLC to Udena LLC is a voidable contract, ma'am. In fact, it's something that is recognized by the members of the consortium when they signed a joint operating agreement. A provision of the joint operating agreement provides that for the sale to be finalized, the parties have the party or the transferor has to ensure that they get all prior permits or approvals from the government.
That's
And
right. So
the most critical po, ma'am, Your Honor, is the approval from
that's
the
not
Department.
avoidable. That's not avoidable contract. That's an incomplete sale as far as the DOE is concerned. Is that correct? Hindi siya avoidable. Hindi siya avoidable, kundi incomplete talaga.
Your Honor, as far as the DOE is concerned, our perception of our appreciation of that sale would be more of a voidable sale rather than an incomplete sale.
To my mind, it's incomplete because we already stated that legal, technical, and financial capability are essential to any contracting party or interested buyer. If those are not established, then clearly there has been no meeting of the minds. How could there be a contract?
Your Honor, as far as the validity of the contract is concerned, in terms of whether or not it meets the requirements under the Civil Code, we believe, Your Honor, that it's different from what is required by law for the approval of the Department of Energy of any such transfer. So we believe, Your Honor, that it's more of a voidable contract considering it has the elements of.
Pwede pong makita yung kontrata? Meron na tayong kopya? For public record na ba yung kontrata?
Your Honor, we submitted all the relevant documents.
Okay. It's one of those documents. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yun lang yung tanong.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Chair, just to pursue that point.
Yes,
by
Senator Lacson.
Amy.
Yes, go ahead. Po.
Yes, I'm just wondering, kasi yung Constitution, merong provision sa inviolability of contracts, ano? So if it is a completed contract, as you mentioned, kasi sabi ni Senator Amy, it should be, or it must have been an incomplete contract, and you're maintaining that it's a contract. So how would that reconcile with the inviolability of contract provision under the Constitution? And there are existing jurisprudence on this. Is it so stipulated in the contract that it can be voided?
By implication, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, any transferee or transferor into the consortium has to agree and has to hold itself bound by the provisions as well of the joint operating agreement. And in the joint operating agreement, it expressly provides that all prior or all pending permits required from the government, which includes the approval of the Department of Energy, be obtained for it to be quote-unquote final. Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, Mr. Chair, if it's by implication, then it will be subject to further or final interpretation by the Supreme Court if it comes to that. Ano? Kasi pagka medyo may vagueness do sa nakasulat sa contract, then we may face some legal problems later on. So just a thought, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lacson. In fact, I'd like to go ask Bodhi in the qualifications, that Yusek Marcos mentioned earlier, and let me just flash on the slide because Yusek Marcos made mention of the contracting round, and the contracting round is very strict when it comes to technical qualifications. Let me just. What do I? Let me just share my screen, Dito pa sa contracting round, which is governed by Department Circular 2017-12-0017, and it's stipulated here that the applicant should demonstrate, or part of the criteria is technical qualifications and financial qualifications. So for example, if I am interested to be a service contractor, part of my evaluation will be my technical qualification and my financial qualification. And in the same circular, the applicant should submit documents that pertain to experiences, achievements, and track record pertaining to oil and gas and this type of operations. No, it's very clear in the annex and in the department circular. So, in other words, I have to demonstrate my financial and technical capability to be a service contractor. Um, to Yusek Marcos or to ASEC Body, is this department circular still being practiced and is still being um, implemented for potential service contractors?
Okay na. Yes, Mr. Chair. But I just want to inform the chair, the body, that SC38 is already a service contract, and the consortium is the service contractor itself, meaning Chevron or later on repeats Udena, it will be part of the consortium, and the consortium has a technical expertise as well as the operatorship. This is different from applying for a new area wherein you will be conducting this department circular ECECP.
Correct. I know that, Yusek. But my point of the matter here is, for any service contractor, it's very important to demonstrate your technical and financial capability. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Opo.
Okay. And obviously the service contractor is being governed by the owners of that contractor, correct?
Wait. I beg your pardon.
So the contractor, correct, the contractor is being governed by the owners of that contractor. No, there are also other owners on top of the contractor, correct?
The owner is the service contractor itself. Then they can outsource some subcontractors for that.
What I'm saying, the service contractor, on top of the service contractor, there are different companies also, tama?
Yes, Your Honor. It could be a consortium.
Correct. And for example, in this case, the contractor is Chevron Malampaya, correct? One of the contractors.
Your Honor, it's the consortium itself.
It's a
Shell, Chevron, and PNOC. It's the service contractor 38.
Correct. So they have to demonstrate their technical capability, all three of them, correct?
No, as a whole.
As a whole,
As a
okay. Okay. But the contractors as a whole should demonstrate their experience, demonstrate their capability, correct?
As a whole, Your Honor. Yes, Your
As a
Honor.
whole, okay. All right. But do you also evaluate the companies that govern the contractors? For example, Chevron and Shell is being governed by their own boards, their own mother companies. Do you also evaluate that?
They have their own JOA, and they all agree on certain conditions. And their consortium will be reviewed, evaluated as a whole, as a whole service contractor, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Okay, let's leave that for now because I'll go back to that issue later on. No? Let me just go to what Senator Lacson and Senator Marcos mentioned earlier: the sale of the interest and obligations to Malampaya. And earlier, Asek Bodi mentioned that the sale is governed by Section 11, no, which is in your screen right now, and it's very clear in Section 11 of PD 87 that you cannot transfer or assign your rights without prior approval of the DOE. Does this still hold, Yusek Marcos?
We have the classic as far as the parties they can agree. Stop. There, sorry, Mr. Chair, for quite a bit of technical difficulty. As to your question earlier, Mr. Chair, yes, Mr. Chair, it still holds.
Does this apply to the transaction between Udena and Chevron?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And why is it important that this law applies to that transaction? Because I know Udena, we invited Udena and Chevron here also, and we will hear from them later on their comments. But why is it, from the point of view of the department, that this is an important provision that should be governing that transaction?
Mr. Chair, the significance of the law is to ensure that all service contracts are properly operated and that the obligations of any contractor are met. It's critical to our energy security. It's as we've discussed earlier, Mr. Chair. Really, it's to ensure, Mr. Chair, that the obligations and the responsibilities of service contractors are upheld and are properly met.
So in this case, if your comment earlier that the department's position is this transaction should get prior approval of the DOE, how will now DOE assure us that the contractor or the potential contractor is technically capable of operating as a service contractor? How will the department assure us, the consumers, that the new buyers is technically capable of stepping into the shoes of the service contractor?
Before I go into that, Mr. Chair, if I may be allowed, I'd like to give a quick point regarding historical context. Mr. Chair, the purchase of Udena is not without precedent. Earlier, back in 1999, there was actually there were several transfers actually of ownership. In fact, in one such transfer, I think it was Oxy, Texaco, Mr. Chair, to Specs. In that transfer, Mr. Chair, it actually took the Department of Energy 1 year in order to evaluate the technical, financial, and legal capability of the transferee. And with that precedent, Mr. Chair, we are guided by the prudence required in evaluating the technical and financial and legal capacity of the assignee. And Mr. Chair, of course, definitely the Department of Energy is looking at this very, very carefully. As you earlier pointed out, we do the same thing for the conventional exploration program, the upstream energy program of the DOE. Wherein we ask a lot of documents from potential contractors, and in this case, in fact, it will be a continuing effort. We will be asking more documents from the transferee to determine their fitness to fill the shoes of Chevron Malampaya as a member of the consortium, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Lacson.
Yes, since in your own words, the contract is not final, what happens? Do you have any alternative plan in case the contract is not finally perfected? May backup plan po ba kayo?
Your Honor, Mr. Chair, if it's in relation to the transfer of Udena of Chevron Malampaya to Udena,
Yeah, that is correct. That is correct. What will happen if that collapses? By your own evaluation, because it's subject to further evaluation by the DOE. So what happens if it collapses? It does not push through. Do you have some alternative plans? to
Your
contain
Honor,
the project?
Your Honor, Mr. Chair, it's a commercial transaction. What would probably happen? It hasn't happened before, but if in the event that it does happen, and as discussed within the DOE, then we would be constrained to ask that we will not recognize the transfer. In such a case, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, we would have to ask them to either look for another purchaser that has the appropriate technical, legal, and financial capability in order to protect the interests of the national government, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
You're referring to Chevron, no?
Yes, Your Honor.
So what happens if there are no other entities interested to purchase Chevron share?
There are several possible options, Your Honor. The consortium, the other members of the consortium, if they are capable, can try to exercise their right to match and purchase the remaining 45%. Another option would be to have
How
some.
about PNOC taking over the 45%?
If
Because
PNOC can
as it-
purchase
Yes.
financially, Mr. Chair, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, then they can. So there are several options, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Kasi I understand in other countries like China, for example, yung CNOC, sila yung mas may say, hindi ba? And the equivalent of CNOC here is the PNOC. So why don't we just give it to PNOC? Anyway, this is a very viable project. And it is earning revenues for the national government. So why not a government corporation instead of a private entity?
Currently, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, currently we are bound by the service contract, by the commercial contract that governs the three members of the consortium. But in the event, actually, that Your Honor, Mr. Chair, that's actually one of the options that have been discussed by the Department of Energy in the event that the license of the SC38 was not extended. Then there's a possibility that we would look into PNOC or PNOC EC or both would operate the service contract, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, ang idea ko lang is why not give PNOC a more significant role in this endeavor instead of, you know, as of now PNOC only owns 10%, di ba? So if it has the wherewithal or with the assistance of the national government, then probably PNOC can increase its percentage share.
You're correct, Your Honor, Mr. Chair. That's actually a viable
That's
option.
also a possibility. That's a
Yes, Your Honor.
possibility.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Senator Lacson, the presence of here with us is the PNOC president and CEO. If you want to direct your questions to him so he can answer us with some details.
Yes, maybe it is safe to presume that PNOC has the technical, at least technical capability, di ba? Yung financial, that's another matter, but that can be resolved later on. I'm just looking at possible scenarios. No, I'm not. I've nothing against Udena, no, coming into the picture, but I'm only thinking ahead. Na in case magkaroon ng major problems and the takeover does not push through, then para lang for purposes of planning, meron tayong backup plan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator
PNOC
Lacson.
can respond. Yeah, maybe PNOC can respond to that.
Yeah, Admiral Lista, you may respond.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Senator Lacson, Senator Aimee. I think the best officer that should answer that is my subsidiary president, Mr. Chairman, and he's here, General Ross Bigas, because he owns the 10%. However, we are both studying the possibility of actually getting more because of the possible sale of Chevron. Mr. May I request that General Bigas be recognized, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you recognize po, General Brigues. General Brigues, you recognize.
Mr. Chair, dear Senator, good morning po.
Good morning. Senator Lacson has some ideas on PNOC taking over the portion of Chevron. No, first of all, we want to know if that's possible within PNOC's operation, and then what's your comment on that?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, Honorable Senator. Actually, that's part of the long-term plan we have because since we joined the Malampaya, we already trained our own people in order that we have the technical capability. We seconded them and we trained them in subsea and on-sea above surface planning and implementation, and we work closely with specs on this. However, currently, technically and financially, we are not yet capable of taking over such big operations because in our own estimates, it would take about two more contracts or operations of this magnitude before we can really operate deep sea water exploration projects. We have an experience in onshore, especially the one in Isabela, and we did that. But in offshore and deep water projects, we're still wanting the technical capability. But that's part of our plan. So hoping that as we go about probably two more projects like Malampaya, then probably we can already implement as probably an operator for offshore deep water because this is really a very complex operation. So right now, Mr. Senator, we have plans to that effect, long-term plans to that effect.
Mr. Chairman. And
Yes,
when
Senator
you
Lacson.
say, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And when you say it's long-term plan, hindi ito possible before 2024, yung expiration.
Mr. Senator, practically it is not possible before
It is not.
2024 for specs to operate for PNOCEC to operate Malampaya.
So I go back to my previous question. What happens if the entry of Udena, do sa purchase ng Chevron, will not push through? So we have a big problem because PNOC itself has admitted na hindi nyo kaya. So the other options left sa labas ng PNOC. And would that be still a viable option?
Mr. Senator, probably the way to answer that is a promise of Shell for them to really ensure that if they divest that share of theirs, they have to ensure that Malampaya will be operating at the same capability that they have. Because we also have a right with the JOA in order to probably disagree. We will not give consent if Shell transfers to another operator, which we don't believe that will be capable of undertaking deep water offshore project. That's our responsibility to the Filipino community for energy security. So that's part of the JOA po. Any partner can say no to a transaction. That is a fairly reasonable reason for us to say no. So we have to exercise that option, Mr. Chair. Mr. Senator.
When you say long term, how long are you talking?
Mr. Senator, if I say about two Malampaya projects right now, we are working on another one. That's SC57. So probably it will take about 10 years, Mr. Senator, 10 to 12 years. Because
So
the
you're
next
talking
one
about
coming
you're talking about
2027.
2030.
Yes, that's the fairly
Thank you.
estimate for PNOCEC, Mr. Senator. Thank you po.
Thank you.
Thank you, General Brigues and Senator Lacson. Asik Bodi, Asik Pulido, I want to pursue again the transaction, no, because this is probably one of the most important focus of the resolution. And the department has a contrary view to the position of Udena and Chevron. And can you elaborate to us how come the DOE took a contrarian view, to their position? Because Udena and Chevron is saying that they didn't take over the service contractor directly, but they took over the owners of the service contractor. So, but your position is because this is, technical capability is very important. Therefore, it needs prior approval from the DOE. So, what is the logic behind that view? Because if you read through the position papers of, or not position papers, but the letters of Udena and Chevron, they're talking about a different scenario, and therefore PD 87 does not apply to them. That is their argument, no? But in your argument, no, PD 87 applies to them. So can you describe to us why the department took this position?
Mr. Chair, it was more of a national interest issue. One of the things that the Department of Energy has been consistently raising with all our service contractors is the fact that if you have a service contract, you have an ongoing obligation to ensure that you keep exploring and trying to maximize the resources that are located within that service contract. Your Honor, Mr. Chair, the SC38 is quite an extensive field with several potential potential fields. And even before Udena stepped in and purchased the shares of Chevron, one of the critical things that we were emphasizing with the consortium is that they have to keep continuing their exploration activities as provided for under the terms of the service contract. And one of the concerns that the department has with whenever there's a group of companies, such as a consortium, is that you cannot do an appropriate exploration program if it's not supported by other members of the consortium. When we say support, Mr. Chair, it takes a lot of resources to do petroleum upstream energy exploration. A well can be as much as $100 million US. So in the past, we have seen some problems with how companies try to fulfill their obligations. We've seen problems where a member of the consortium might not agree to the use of resources in order to continue with the exploration program. And so it's critical for us to ensure that every member of the consortium would be supportive of the exploration activities that the Department of Energy requires, Mr. Chair.
So ASEC, therefore, you also look at the parent company or the company behind the consortium, because some of the consortiums were, the direct consortium members were incorporated for the purposes of being a service contractor. But the mother company, just to put it simply, I want to make it simple lang, no? The mother company it speaks about a different world, no? Because the mother company can be a Shell, can be a Chevron, can be one of the major oil players. So does the department look at the entirety of the entity, or just the consortium entity alone?
Mr. Chair, we try to take a very holistic approach. So yes, Mr. Chair, we would also look at the mother companies if there is a mother company behind the transferee, then we would be obligated to look into that as well.
That's my point earlier when I was asking Yusek Marcos. Do you look at the mother company and therefore the governing board that dictates on the service contractor company? No, because in this, just to put it simply, there's a service contractor company and there's a mother company. And the service contractor company are typically incorporated for the purposes of that service contractor. But it doesn't paint the entire picture, because the mother company can be a Shell, can be a Chevron, can be a Texaco, a big company, supporting that service contractor company. That's why I was asking Yusek Marcos earlier, the due diligence that you conduct insofar as technical capability is concerned. So, Asek, going back to the transaction, since you took a different position, and you made mention earlier that the sale was concluded on March 11, 2020. In your opinion, was there any violation insofar as this transaction is concerned and insofar as PD 87 is concerned? Because obviously, the transaction has been consummated. Obviously, there is no prior approval. And from what I hear from you, there is no also notices to the department regarding this transaction. So is there any violation in your opinion as to the transaction?
None, Mr. Chair. There is no violation, Mr. Chair, because we understand the nature of the joint operating agreement amongst the parties, Mr. Chair. Before any sale could proceed, the joint operating agreement requires them to first to get the consent of the other members of the consortium, and at the same time to offer the other members of the consortium their right to match the offer. And so, in the view of the Department of Energy, Mr. Chair, we would have to wait for all of those events to take place before an actual quote-unquote sale can be considered and evaluated by the Department of Energy, Mr. Chair.
Senator Marcos?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to go back to Senator Lacson's point regarding a fallback position in the event that the Udena contract is disapproved or fails in the area of technical expertise. I think that the MVP group, the Pangilinan group, has been very vocal in their plan to integrate SC 72 and 75 into the Malampaya infrastructure and has shown plans to buy into the consortium. Have this been explored? Could this be a backup plan? Maybe somebody from DOE, ASEC po, nakausap na ba ninyo si Manny Pangilinan kasi panay ang sabi niya na interesado nga siya sa Malampaya consortium.
Not yet.
Na ba to? Maliban to sa SC72 at SC75, integrate daw niya into one system.
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Chair. We haven't discussed the intention of Shell to sell their share, their stake in SC38. We haven't discussed it with any private party. But again, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, as pointed out by the Honorable Senator Ping Lacson, there are several options that are being studied by the Department of Energy, and one option is if the sale is not approved by the DOE, then we would offer it to the general public. That's one option. And when we offer that, then it would undergo the same process, and then we would evaluate the fitness of any potential transferee, Mr. Chair, Your Honor.
Yes, I think San Miguel has also shown interest in being a part of the consortium, whether it's the Shell portion or the portion of Chevron. I think San Miguel has also evinced interest. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, we haven't received any formal notices from anybody interested, but we've heard the same reports, Your Honor, Mr. Chair. But the Department of Energy takes an objective stance, and we wait for a formal notice from any of these companies if they will evince any interest. And at the same time, Mr. Chair, Your Honor, it is a commercial transaction, so any such discussion would occur between the members of the consortium and other third parties, Your Honor, Mr. Chair. And it's only when it's already proceeded to a more formal stage, then usually that's when the Department of Energy is notified, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you. And also, I think for an interested buyer, the immediate value of operating the Malampaya gas field at this point is in the facilities, both as a suitable entry point for the importation of LNG and its distance from the petroleum service contracts in Balabac, Recto, and Northwest Palawan. So I think as an LNG hub, wouldn't it also raise some revenue for PNOC and for the national government?
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Chair. The facilities can be used for to further any such LNG program, but of course we're still waiting for the consortium's take on it. But yes, you're right, Your Honor. It is the infrastructure can possibly be used for such an activity.
I suppose my point is that if the Udena contract is for some reason voided, hindi naman tayo dapang-dapa. Meron pa naman tayong mga options. There are those who are financially, legally, and even perhaps with some assistance technically capable. Hindi po ba? Hindi naman tayo nakatali sa Udena ng basta. Tama po ba yun?
Yes, Your Honor, that's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Senator Lacson.
in your exercise of due diligence on the financial capability of Udena, did you have information or do you have the information as to the source or sources of financing of the $565 million capital infusion? I am referring to the capital infusion for the purchase of the 45% Chevron shares.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, we'd have to apologize. What happened po kasi, when Chevron Malampaya asked for the approval po of the Department of Energy, we essentially gave it back to them because we told them it has to be Shell Philippines Exploration Company or SPECS that should seek approval because they were the proper party po in interest. And apologies, Mr. Chair, Your Honor. Their letter is dated October 23, but we actually only formally received it on October 28. And it was only on October 28 that we've started evaluation. So apologies, Your Honor, Mr. Chair. We are still in the process of evaluating their financial documents as of this moment. And it's apologies, Your Honor. The financial documents is currently with our financial services. It hasn't even reached the executive committee of the Department of Energy yet. Per our administrative organization, they would have to evaluate it carefully first before it reaches the executive committee and before it reaches the secretary, Mr. Chair.
Yes, but as a matter of requirement, you will need that.
Yes, Your Honor. We would require
Which you
those
will share,
documents.
which you're willing to share with the committee for
I
transparency.
I believe so. I don't think, Mr. Chair, Your Honor, I don't think we are bound by any confidentiality being a government regulator. Yes, Mr. Chair.
I thought so too. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Lacson. As you mentioned earlier, there's no violation. But I read the sale purchase agreement, and there are only two conditions for the closing. The first condition is a waiver from SPECS and PNOC, which they have gotten. In fact, there's a question here. If you took a contrarian view, how come PNOC, who is an attached agency of DOE, gave their waiver? And then number two condition is an approval from PCC, the Philippine Competition Commission, both of which have been complied with. None in the sale purchase agreement required prior approval from DOE. So for all intents and purposes, this is already a done deal. Naging footnote na lang si DOE after. So going to the question of Senator Aimee, this is already a done deal. And DOE is just probably a footnote when they were trying to complete the transaction. So I don't agree with you that there is no violation because you said earlier that technical capability is such an important aspect of a contractor. And we also established that the mother company is also very important in the entire scheme of things. But then again, you were only notified on October 28, 2020, when the deal has been consummated on last March 11, 2020. So we have now a scenario here that the new buyer can be disqualified as a service contractor, and that's where Senator Lacson's comment earlier, or the manifestation earlier. So we are now at the bind. No? So what is now the how do we now rectify this issue, ASIC Body? Because what is at stake is the energy security of our consumers. We have now a new entity who can be potentially disqualified because of its technical inadequacy, and now it's part of a very big um, entity that supplies almost 20% of our grid. So how do we now rectify this, ASEC?
Your Honor, Mr. Chair, if I may, the contract again, it's a private transaction amongst the parties, and the law is read into the contract, Mr. Chair. So first, in the sale purchase agreement, PD 87's provisions, though it might not be expressly in the purchase agreement, it's based on Philippine law. It's read into that contract, Mr. Chair. So it only becomes valid and final really once the Department of Energy approves it. Secondly, Mr. Chair, in the sale and purchase agreement, there was also a discussion regarding that they would be bound by the obligations of the transferee. The transferor rather. And the transferor, in this case, Chevron, bound itself to the joint operating agreement, and the joint operating agreement does expressly provide that any sale to be any sale to be final, the transferee has to get the prior approval of the necessary permits, or in this case, the Department of Energy. Moreover, Mr. Chair, in this context, we're working on precedent, Mr. Chair. So when this occurred last March, we were working on the precedent on what occurred back in 1999, what occurred in several times throughout the history of the service contract, wherein the private parties, the members of the consortium, would do their private transactions, and then it was only after the fact the Department of Energy would come in and evaluate the fitness of the transferee, Your Honor, Mr. Chair. And moreover, we understand the concern regarding the technical capability of the operator. But in this case, the consortium, Mr. Chair, has an operator. So even if in the event, whether likely or unlikely, the Department of Energy disapproves the sale between the purchase agreement between Chevron and Udena, Shell is still there. Shell Exploration is still there as the operator. So the technical capability remains intact as we explore other options on how to deal with the ramifications or the consequences of any disapproval of the share and purchase agreement, Mr. Chair, Your Honor.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Lacson?
just to pursue. So that goes through with PNOC. They can also take over the 45%, assuming that they will have the financial capability, because their lack of technical capability can be covered by the Shell's technical capability, being the operator of the consortium. Correct.
ASEC Bodi, you can respond.
So what's good? Kung ano yung pwede sa Chevron or Udena, pwede rin sa PNOC. In spite of their lack of technical capability, as they admitted earlier, they can still take over the 45%, assuming that they have the financial capability. Correct?
Correct, Your Honor, Mr. Chair. In fact, General Brigues and Admiral Lista, they're being very honest. Their personnel may not have that same level of technical expertise currently, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Offshore
However,
and offshore.
yes, sir. However, it doesn't prevent them from contracting out to a third party. There are several international organizations that have the same technical capability as the current operator. So it doesn't prevent PNOC or PNOC-EC from obtaining those services, Your Honor, Mr. Chair.
Yes, as an aside, in relation to the national policy of generating maximum benefits, for the Filipino people, nasa consideration natin na to give preferential treatment to Filipino workers, di ba? It goes without saying because nasa batas naman yon. Is it so stated in the contract with Udena na ang priority natin is to employ Filipinos, no? And hahanap lang tayo ng foreign workers kung hindi kaya ng Filipino workers. It goes without saying.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Mr. Chair.
But it's also important that you put it in the contract, in the agreement. Just to emphasize.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Lacson. Senator Amy?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just as a matter of curiosity, what happens to the 10% share of PNOC-EC in the consortium? Are its earnings part of Malampaya Fund or is it a separate item? Maybe PNOC? Manong Ruben?
Yes, Admiral Lista.
Do the earnings of PNOC from its 10% share constitute part of the Malampaya Fund or nakahiwalay siya? Paano rin i-remit yun at saan bumabagsak? Wala pong audio.
Admiral Lista or General Brigues, you may respond. Please.
General Brigues will respond, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, dear Senator. The earnings po of the 10% of PNOC-EC is part of the consortium share of 40%. Iba po yung sa Malampaya Fund na 60%, yun po yung government share. And then we have the consortium share of 40%, and from that 40%, 10% po yung sa PNOC-EC, and then total dyan is 4% of the 40%.
Parang iba-iba palang bahagi yun. Pwede bang i-breakdown yan at magsumiti sa committee kay chairman para maintindihan namin kasi iba-ibang percent eh. At saka hindi kasi maliwanag kung part ng overall na Malampaya Fund or kung saan napupunta. Pwede po ninyo kami bigyan ng chart or additional information.
We will submit po, dear Senator, Mr. Chair po. We will submit, Madam Senator.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my belief that the national government, through the PNOC-EC, can certainly invoke and assert its preemptive and consent rights over the state of Shell, the same way that Udena did. So it's very important that we clarify where dividends, earnings, and other incomes land. Kasi mukhang sa transfer, hindi rin maliwanag kung saan babagsak to. Thank you po.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Lacson.
Yeah, I'd like to understand that the 40-60 sharing, that 40% is after CAPEX, no? Hindi ito yung plainly 40% foreign, 60% Filipino. Yung 40% will be computed after CAPEX. Is that a correct statement?
General Brigues, you may answer since you are a participant in the consortium.
Net of CAPEX and OPEX.
No,
Yes po,
probably
yes po, Mr. Chair, Madam Senator, Mr. Senator, it is net po of CAPEX and OPEX. Ang 40% po.
So how much in percentage are we talking about here? Kung 40% after CAPEX and OPEX, magkano yung net? Ilang percent? Actually.
It varies
That should go
po.
up.
It varies po year on year. But
On the average. The 40% should go up, di ba?
It depends if there is a project, sir.
Kasi dideduct mo yung CAPEX saka OPEX eh.
sometimes po, if we have outline projects, Mr. Senator, Mr. Chair, mag-iiba po, bababa, tataas, but I really don't have the figure about the average right now, but we can provide po the committee.
I don't see it going down, ano? It could only go up. Kasi magdideduct ka eh, magne-net ka eh. So yung 40% na yon, in actual fact, tataas yon. Yung 40-60, magbabari yon, but the 40 will never go down. And the 60% will never go up. Bababa yung 60 sa net. Pag sinabi natin net-net, tataas yung 40%, bababa yung 60% in sharing. In terms of yung percentage shares.
I'm sorry, Mr. Senator, I don't really have a definitive answer right now, but my logic.
Maski guesstimate?
We're looking at our figures right now po, but
How about DOE? Do you have any idea?
Asek Bodhi, Asek Pulido, or Yusek Marcos can also respond.
Honorable Chair, in terms of the 60 and 40% sa revenue sharing, pareho lang po yun pareho lang po yun, consistent po yun, dahil pareho pong net of revenues and OPEX po yun, and net of CAPEX and OPEX po yun. So, pag tumaas po yung revenue, siyempre po yung 60 at saka yung 40, pareho mataas din po. Because it's net po.
Yeah. No, pero ang nag-infuse ng CAPEX at saka ng OPEX, yung consortium, hindi yung Philippine government. That's what I'm referring to. That's why yung 40% is not really 40%. Kasi ine-net mo yun eh. Ine-net mo, tatanggalin yung from 40% share, magbabawas pa sila ng CAPEX at saka ng OPEX. So hindi talaga 60% yung sa Philippine government or sa Philippines, kundi mas mababa in actual fact. Kasi hindi naman tayo naglalagay ng capital eh. Ang nag-infuse ng CAPEX dito, yung Shell, di ba? Or yung consortium. Correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
So
yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, nagsasubmit po sila ng work program and budget. Yung pong work program and budget for the year po, katulad po ito, hanggang 2024 po hinihingi na namin yung work program and budget po. Yung work program and budget will go under scrutiny and rigid evaluation ng Review and Evaluation Committee, technical and financially. At doon po ay may mga pwedeng i-allow that disallowed yung ating pong Review and Evaluation Committee. So ibig sabihin po, totally nababawas na po yun. May control po ang Philippine government doon, may control po ang regulators natin, ang DOE. So most likely po sa trending sa lahat, historically po, statistically, talaga pong tumataas po. Pareho nito, CAPEX and OPEX po.
Kaya nga hindi na talaga strictly 40% yun. That's my point, Pag nagbawas say ng say 40 million, for the sake of discussion, Pag nagbawas sila pandagdag yun eh. Nagbawas sila ng halimbawang okay, may CAPEX akong 5 million. May OPEX akong 3 million. So, naiiba yung equation. That's I'm referring to. Hindi na to talaga strictly 40-60 in accordance with the Constitution. Kasi pagka nagbawas sila, pandagdag sa kanila, pabawas sa 60 natin yon. And we want to find out, can you just give us a rough estimate on the actual share? No? Yung 40-60 is no longer 40-60 for all intents and purposes. Gusto lang namin malaman, ako particularly, ano na, hindi na 40-60, kundi naging 55-45 ba ito na? Or I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to equate it with the constitutional requirement. Ang gusto ko lang malaman, ano yung net-net after deducting yung ginastos nila do sa 100%, do sa universe.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes,
Meron
Your
kayong
Honor.
estimate? Para lang may idea kami.
Yes, Your Honor. We will provide po the records. Gusto ko lang din pong i-emphasize na the cost recoverable is on a maximum of 70% only. That's why yung pong net proceeds will come from the 30%. Opo, it will come from the 30%. So, ibig sabihin po, mag-submit sila ng program and budget. Definitely, they will not recover it all. Up to 70% lang po. And as we go, nare-recover na po yung mga capex nila. Palaki na po ng palaki yung revenues natin. So
in
ibig
this
sabihin
sky's
po,
the limit.
hindi po. Hanggang 70% po. At yung 30%, yun po yung 40-60. Ganun po yan.
Okay.
And we will submit the records po para po for your reference.
Salamat. Maraming salamat, Sec.
Just to pursue that, no, it's correct, Senator Lacson, na it's not strictly 60-40 from top line. Kasi they deduct OPEX and CAPEX. After that, the net of that, you divide it 60-40. Ganun po, in simple terms, ha? In simple terms po. So yun po yung, so strictly speaking, it's not 60-40 from the top line or from the gross revenues. No?
Correct. You put it more simply than how I described it. So thank you. And we want to find out in real numbers, ano yon?
Yeah,
Yes,
Yusek Marcos, please submit to us the requirement of Senator Lacson.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Senator. We will submit.
Mr. Chair, miski yung PNOC, kasi sila yung may share ng 10%, sabi ni General Brigues. Kung
Yes,
pwede
General Brigues, please submit to us the requirement, Senator Marcos.
We will po, Mr. Chair, Madam Senator, we will.
Yes. With the kind indulgence of Senator Lacson and Senator Marcos, we also invited the President of Udena, si Ms. Teresa Loresco. The representative of Udena, si Ms. Teresa Loresco, so she can shed light on the transaction between Udena and Chevron, no? Pursuant to our discussion earlier. So, Ms. Loresco, you're recognized.
Yes, good morning, Senators. May I defer to, sir? Actually, I am part of the CMLLC group, and I am here with Ms. Belinda Rosella, who is president of CMLLC as well. So may I defer to her, sir, in the first instance for
Okay.
the transaction?
Yeah. We recognize Ms. Belinda. I know Ms. Belinda. You've changed from Chevron to UC, but Ms. Rosella is recognized.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat po, Mr. Chair and Senator Ping Lacson, Senator Amy Marcos. Good morning to all of you and the rest of the resource people. Opo, now as you can see, we are still recognized as Chevron Malampaya LLC because the entity has not changed, and that has been expounded on by yourself, Mr. Chair, and the DOE, that this transaction happened at the parent company. Udena Corporation Malampaya Philippines, or using Malampaya Philippines, purchased the shares of the Chevron Malampaya, the shares of Chevron Philippines in CMLLC. So this is our our position has been that this has been a commercial transaction at the parent company. So even with saying that, the employees remain the same. So as you see, sir, I'm still Chevron. I'm still representing Chevron, or the company or the entity, and though we are asking for the change in name in UC 38, it's still the same. So all our employees within in Chevron Malampaya has remained the same, except for Tet. If you remember Tet, Senator, she was with Specs before she has joined us with the in Chevron slash UC 38 LLC. So as CMLLC, we continue to support the consortium, and we continue to provide the support that is needed to continue to operate Malampaya. So there was no transfer. We have in our position that there was no transfer of interest at all. This was a commercial transaction at the parent company.
Miss Belinda, I'm confused. No, are you Udena? Are you Chevron? Well, let's get this basics first, no? Because I'm confused.
Okay.
I met you
Okay.
during your term in Chevron. I know
That's
that.
right.
But
That's
what
right.
is your who is your employer now?
The employer now is Udena. Yes. But
So
the
Udena is your
entity,
employer.
yes, Udena now is my employer.
Okay.
Because they
So
are
in
now
other
the
words,
owners. They are now the owners of my employer, to be exact. Is still CMLLC because I am an employee of Chevron Malampaya
Yeah.
branch of the Philippines. In the Philippines. Now the mother company is owned currently by Udena when it was sold by Chevron Philippines. The transaction started in 2019 and consummated in March 11. So
correct.
the employees are still the same. We have the same duties and responsibilities as a consortium member.
So this debunks the theory of Asek Polido that the transaction can still be void. In fact, it's a consummated transaction because the employer, the beneficial owner of Chevron Malampaya, is already Udena. No? Yes, Senator Marcos.
Yes, what Ms. Rosella is saying is that Udena bought into the mother company, Chevron Philippines. Is that correct?
That is
Not
correct.
Chevron Malampaya.
They bought the shares of Udena Malampaya, bought the shares of Chevron Philippines in Chevron Malampaya LLC.
So is this not a legal fiction? We were taught in law school that what the law prohibits directly cannot be done indirectly. Is this not a circuitous way of effecting transfer and evading through that process Section 11 and the requirement of DOE's approval?
And
That
Mr.
is
Chairman, if I may add,
Yes, Senator Lacson.
it appears that the transaction is a lock, stock, and barrel transaction. Kasi pati yung employees, tinangay na ng Udena sa transaction nila with Chevron. Is that a correct observation? Thank you, Senator Marcos.
Yes. Yes, Madam Rosella, nako-confuse kami kasi sabi mo, employer mo is Udena, you're an Udena employee, but for all the employees, Chevron remains the employer unless a change of name is effected. I hope I'm
okay.
understanding you correctly.
Okay. Let me
Litong-lito
just
po kami.
yes, it is not it's not a simple transaction, that is true. So CMLC, Chevron Malampaya Philippines, or the branch, has a mother company, Chevron Malampaya, that was
But you said
put
you said
together in Delaware.
Correct.
and in
But
Delaware, and it is those shares that was bought by using Malampaya from Chevron Philippines.
yes,
So
but Mr. Chair, Madam
technically,
Rosella, just to
yes,
clarify, you said also that the Chevron Philippine shares that were bought were the specific shares only to do with Chevron Malampaya.
that is correct. It
Hence,
is
it
100%.
is, for all intents and purposes, a transfer to Chevron Malampaya. Kasi wala naman general Chevron shares, di ba? Chevron is a massive multinational all over the countries,
Yes.
all over the world. And then there's Chevron Philippines, hindi rin kasali doon. Wala sa international, wala sa national, kundi yun Malampaya lang talaga. Tama po ba yun?
That is how it is set up. Yes, you are correct, ma'am.
So therefore, since it's a very specific stock transfer, it should land squarely under the PD and the requisites of Section 11.
Our position remains that it is a commercial transaction and it was a share sale.
How can
Done
it
at
be
the
a
parent
commercial
company.
transaction when the only shares that were transferred were only to do with Malampaya? Wala namang biniling Chevron Philippines na iba. Wala namang biniling Chevron International na iba. Laki-laki ng Chevron, yun lang talaga ang pinili.
Senator Marcos, with your kind indulgence, I'll flash the structure, no, so that everyone will be
Ayan
guided
yan, sige. Okay.
accordingly. No. And just for disclosure, this came from Belinda herself, no? Just to
Yes.
put everyone on the same page. So Senator Marcos, if you can
Thank you,
see,
Chair.
on the left column is the Udena Group, in
Correct.
which UC Malampaya purchased the shares of Chevron Philippines. Chevron Philippines owns Chevron Malampaya. So that's the simple equation of it. And at the end, the right column will be the outcome, in which UC Malampaya will own Chevron Malampaya, but Chevron Malampaya is under a change of name. No, Chevron Malampaya requested twice to change its name to UC 38. So this, just to be clear, para all of us will be guided accordingly. This is the structure of the transaction.
I still hold to my conclusion, Mr. Chair. They must have gotten a very expensive and good lawyer. Yun lang po.
And
So,
just
can we? Sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead, Senator. Sorry.
Yeah,
Senator
related
Lacson,
din,
recognized.
Can we at least conclude or assume, assume na ang binili ng Udena is the corporation, yung subsidiary corporation dealing with Malampaya?
Belinda,
The
you may
parent
respond.
company. Yes, the parent
No,
company.
binili na yung company, hindi lang
Binili yung
shares.
company.
Yes. Yung
Yes,
subsidiary
the shares,
company.
100% shares. Yeah.
100%.
But
Correct. Thank you.
So Belinda, do you agree with the statement of DOE that this transaction should require prior approval?
our position remains, Mr. Chair, that again that this did not require DOE approval. However, we submitted the request and sought the consent of the operator specs to complete the request of DOE. But we maintain that our position is that this was a commercial transaction and it did not constitute a transfer of shares, but just the share sale. It was only a share sale at the mother company.
No, we do acknowledge it's a commercial transaction, no? Like all transactions in businesses, they're all commercial. But some commercial transactions are highly regulated because of its nature. And in this case, the transaction is regulated by PD 87, as discussed earlier in length. So I just want to understand, no, from you, why do you think it's not covered by PD 87? No, explain to us in detail why you should not be covered by PD 87. Because in PD 87, it's very clear that it requires prior approval of the DOE.
In our view, the PD 87 was on the purview of assigning its rights, assigning the rights and obligations. But this transaction did not involve the assignment of rights under actually under SC 38 nor PD 87, because we see that there was no change in legal entity, but only an acquisition at the parent level. CMLC remains it remains to be the entity under with which it is transacting under SC38. So it's the same entity, sir. So that is our position. This
It's
did not.
correct, no, that it's correct that the operator remains the same, but the beneficial owner or the parent company is entirely different. No, and this is the subject
that
of
could be.
this is the subject of our discussion right now. Because from what DOE mentioned earlier, they also look at the technical capabilities on its entire structure, not only on per entity. No, that's why we have to clear that, because I saw from your corporate papers that UC Malampaya was only incorporated in 2019. No, so obviously, part of the requirement of DOE is to look at experience in the oil and gas industry. No? So this is actually a big question mark already. And we also made mention earlier that the contractor is, or the parent company of the contractor is very important because it dictates on the decision making of the contractor. For example, a 45% stake in the contractor or in the consortium will definitely have a lot of influence on how the consortium will operate moving forward. And that affects us, no, as consumers. Again, we established earlier that Malampaya is 1 in every 4 homes in our country through electricity. So it affects all of us. That's why it's also an interest to us to understand who will be the new owners, and if the new owners will have the technical capability, experience to operate such a complicated asset. That's why we were establishing all of this earlier.
Yes.
Now, the question here, Ms. Belinda, there seems to be a divergence of idea, no? And what is now your position if ever DOE will not approve your transaction? No, because right now right now you have already consummated, as evidenced by your employer, but there's a big doubt now whether technical capability requirement has been fulfilled. So, what is your opinion on that? Because this is a major event that will hamper your transaction.
My opinion is that we will challenge it. Despite the change in you would say parent company ownership, Udena remains true to its vision to ensure that we continue to operate and to support the the consortium. We are in the interest of continuing Malampaya. We are continuing to support the license extension, the drilling program. We continue to have that support. So should there be, going back to your question, should there be a challenge, then should there be a question in the DOE? As we said, we have submitted all our technical capability. They can see that all the members of CMLC are technically capable. The same way that in some aspects, Udene has their that has experience in the upstream energy as if they will dig deeper, and we have submitted all of this to the DOE. Also, it may not be in the interest of the Filipino people if this transaction will be stopped, because it will stop the negotiations. It will stop. It may cause disruption. It may cause disruption in the operations and the possibility of the discussions in the license extension. But in any case, we will, Udena or CMLC at this point, continues to support SC38 and the government in continuing Malampaya operations safely and reliably. That is what we're trying to do.
Mr. Chairman.
We are not deviating to our original duties and responsibilities as CMLC.
Senator Lacson.
Yes, this early, we can already see a looming legal conflict between Udena and the DOE. And that's the point I raised earlier, that it could reach even the Supreme Court to resolve this legal, because there's a divergence of opinions. DOE is saying one thing while Udena is invoking another. So at any rate, moving on, I'd like if Ms. Belinda is in a position to share with this committee or to divulge the source of the $565 million investment of Udena. How much of it is foreign or direct foreign investment or coming from foreign investors, and how much is Filipino?
I have no breakdown, sir, but we have it came from, of course, debt from ANZ and ING, and the rest is
No, I'm
Udena
I'm not referring to loans. I'm referring to direct foreign investment or foreign investors.
From my knowledge, sir, there is no foreign investor, sir.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you very much, Ms. Belinda.
Yes.
Ma'am Udena tuloy. Ma'am Belinda.
Yes.
It's quite unusual, no? And it boggles me that a transaction like this, $556 million, isn't it much more prudent to get guidance first from the department whether they have to approve it or not? No, because in transactions like this, this magnitude, it's more prudent to seek guidance because it's very clear that this can be a source of conflict, yung Section 11 of PD 87. And how come you didn't, I was looking at your correspondence to DOE, and I did not see any request to clarify, any request or any guidance. You pursued directly to the transaction. No, I'm just wondering how come in normal cases they would really seek guidance from government because I've talked to all oil and gas operators and experts, and they know PDA 87 very well. In fact, the previous transactions of Shell in Malampaya, 3 transactions, no? When Oxy sold to Specs, when Specs sold to Texaco, and when PNOC went in, all of them had prior approvals, no, from DOE. So in this case, how come you never seek guidance from DOE as to what process to take so that it will not lead to litigation and this type of conflict?
I may have to defer to the negotiators, which is again Chevron corporate, and to probably answer that question. No? But I will get back to you and get their feedback on that, because as I said, I'm part of CMLC. Was part of the was is still part of the legal entity. So I'll get back to you, sir, on what the steps they took of the negotiating team on the Chevron side.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Mr. Chair, Your Honors.
Yes, Yusek Polido.
Mr. Chair, not that we're trying to defend you. Then, in fact, we have disagreed on the fact that the DOE should be exercising jurisdiction over the transaction. However, Your Honors, to be fair, for two things. One, Mr. Chair, all the prior transfers that you raised were all the approvals of the Department of Energy were not obtained prior to the transfer, but were all obtained post or after the transfer. And in some cases, Your Honor, it took the then Department of Energy almost or even more than a year before approving such transfer. And secondly, Your Honor, to be fair to the transferee, Udena in this case, they did submit to the jurisdiction of the DOE when they submitted all the documents that we asked for, and they did. Well, at least so far, they've been cooperative, and they've told us that they will be submitting to the jurisdiction of the Department of Energy. Mr. Chair, Your Honors.
What we're trying to avoid here, Asek and Belinda, is precisely what Senator Lacson mentioned earlier. A possible conflict that will affect the operations and in turn affect the supply of electricity to our country. And we've seen jolts in Malampaya, and these jolts can raise electricity rates as high as 50 centavos to about a peso. We don't want that to happen. No? We want sound, technical, capable operators that will operate Malampaya to its fullest capacity and maximize the resources. That's why we're here, no, to understand this transaction, because people might think this transaction is just a pure corporate transaction. In my opinion, this transaction affects the consumers because of its magnitude. No, it's not an ordinary 1 megawatt plant. It's a natural gas that supplies 3,000 plus megawatts of power. No, so it's very important. And Ma'am Belinda, I have one question, no, and I just want to understand Udena, no. Have Udena explored any oil and gas wells in the Philippines or outside of the Philippines? Because part of the technical requirements I flashed earlier is experience. So have Udena explored, extracted, produced any oil and gas reservoir in the Philippines or other parts of the world?
Just going back to the transaction, Senator. Again, as a as a non-operator, this is, as we said, that we have technical capability with respect to, as a non-operator investor into the SC38. With respect to Udena's direct oil and gas experience in exploring and development, there is none as of the moment. But we have expressed our interest in we have expressed our interest and have in fact participated in the last PCECT.
Does it hold any service contract as of the moment here in the Philippines or outside of the Philippines?
None.
So wala siyang service contract rin.
Yeah,
And you might
our
argue
first
that...
venture.
Sorry?
SE38 is the first.
It's the first, correct. That's why this is the first exposure of Udena in a oil and gas industry. And also not an ordinary oil and gas industry, but a operating oil and gas industry. So with that, Ma'am Belinda, thank you very much for your participation. We'll go
Thank
back
you.
to you later on. But we also invited independent resource persons to shed light on the whole industry. And let me call Mr. Ed Manialak, who was a former PNOC president and also has vast experience in the oil and gas industry, to share his comments and thoughts on this transaction, as well as the oil and gas industry. Mr. Manialak, you're recognized.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, very, very interesting discussion so far. It's been very educational. But let me, I submitted a PowerPoint presentation.
Yes.
Can we
yes.
put that on very quickly?
Okay.
And I'll go through it very quickly. Most of the topics have been discussed. I just want to make sure that some of the emphasis be recalled by the senators. Okay. First of all, before that, as you've said, Malampaya gas is the first and foremost oil and gas asset of the Philippines. When it was first completed, the development, it was considered an engineering feat. And Chevron and Shell as operator, together with PNOC, were celebrated in Asia. This is a deep water field, gas field, the deepest water gas field in Southeast Asia. So it really needs, extreme engineering and design capability in the form of Chevron and Shell. I don't think from the very start, if Udena was there, he could touch a pipe there. This cost the entire project $4.2 billion. So it is not a small operation. So when we heard about the news that Udena got 45%, it was a big surprise to us, to the industry, because as we've said, the PD-87 was born out of the oil embargo in 1970, and President Marcos at the time acted very quickly to answer the call for improved oil security. Next slide, please. This is the newscast that hit us very strongly. So, as I've said, you've all discussed this, but as I've said, it is the engineering, it is the technical know-how of the service contractors that is important here. Technical know-how and funding. It's 4.2 billion. And these guys risk this money, in the Philippines. Sige, next. Next slide. So let me jump to my conclusion right away, and then I will just try to justify these conclusions I made. First, on Chevron, and I will justify this, should be allowed to live. If they want to leave the service contractor group, they should be allowed to live, but without remuneration. I leave this to the legal people and if I were the DOE, I would refer this to the OGCC, the Office of the General Counsel for Corporate Government Corporation, to see whether in fact the Chevron has the right to sell, what rights. Okay? And the second one, Udena, should definitely not be allowed to come in as a service contractor. It has no experience, no qualification, etc., etc. And lastly, to maximize the returns to the Filipino people, PNOC should take over Chevron's 45% interest. Next. This is the rationale behind the PD87. PD87 was passed or initiated by President Marcos in 1972. And immediately after that, the next year, he formed PNOC. It was the same time that Indonesia became big with Pertamina, and we were at the same stage as Petronas of Malaysia, because the Asian countries at that time realized that we have to take care of our own to protect us from the dangers and risks of oil embargo again. Next. Okay, this is one of the key terms that you have to remember. Malampaya is owned by the state, okay? The Regalian doctrine, where all the minerals, including oil and gas, must remain with the state. Next. And full control and supervision. The exploration, development, and utilization shall be under the full control of the government. Now, there are several types of service contracts and production sharing contracts. Several countries are now shifting to service contracts for sovereignty issues because the government wants stronger control over the resources. Okay? So what are the key elements of 87, which have been described earlier, but in general fashion? And the first objective was to promote discovery and development of indigenous petroleum reserves. That's one. And two, very importantly, is to maximize benefit to the Filipino people. Anything the government does with Malampaya must be tied to whether this move or this change will go towards maximizing benefit to the Filipino people. Now, in return for the international oil companies that will come to explore, to risk their money to explore and to develop, we want to assure them of just returns by participating and helping us, like Chevron and Shell and PNOC. So how do we achieve these objectives? We achieved it by government directly exploring and producing oil and gas. And this can be done through PNOC, as what Senator Lacson has been pointing out earlier. However, during this time, we must understand, and this is by nature of the business of oil exploration, there is tremendous exploration risk. In other words, not all exploration wells will find oil or gas. As Assistant Secretary Pulido mentioned, one well, deep water in Malampaya, in Palawan, can cost you $100 million, and it come out dry. So that is not under our service contract. You cannot recover that. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that you cannot get small companies here. This has to be, the major companies. And that's what happened with Malampaya. It was Chevron and Shell and the government side at PNOC. So if we do not have the funds yet and we cannot stomach the risk, what we said is we will invite foreign corporations, foreign oil companies to come to service contracts with us. Okay? So we're bringing them in for the funding, for the technology, and their know-how, experience. Now, President Marcos, in his PD87, made this, it is a very important document so that all service contracts are subject to direct approval of the President to be executed by the Petroleum Board at the time, which is now, I assume, the DOE. But it is important enough for the president to be involved. Ownership, as I've said, ownership, all petroleum resources belong to the state. And lastly, importantly, as we discuss, as I'm hearing the DOE say this now, government control. You are in control. The government is in control here. You cannot say that the JOA, that the partners, the consortium, has decided as to. No, government is in control. For your information, I've heard the term JOA mentioned several times. The Joint Operating Agreement, the government has nothing to do with it. The Joint Operating Agreement is an agreement among the service contractors, the consortium, and it governs how they will behave with each other, how they will comply with the service contract. For example, in exploration, during exploration period, if one partner cannot put in his money share for one reason or the other, how would they handle that? How would the group handle that? That's what the JOA is for. The number of meetings they will hold every year, when will the budget within the group be submitted and approved, etc. But it is in the consortium of contractors. The government has nothing to do with it. They can make the decision according to the service contract. Next. Okay, what's the key features of a model service contract? The service contract do not confer ownership of oil or gas reserves. They cannot take the oil and gas reserves and take it home. This is the country's reserves. The service contractor bears all the risk, the exploration, the development, and financial risk. The oil company shoulders all exploration expenses. And if no oil is discovered, it will not recover the exploration cost. Therefore, oil companies are merely service providers. They have no ownership of oil and gas and no ownership of facilities either, because these are all paid for by from the government share out of the full the cost recovery. So at the end of the day, all of this platform, all of this pipeline, upon completion of the work, will have to be turned over, the ownership turned over to the government. Therefore, that's why it's called service contract. The service contractor is paid in cash, equivalent to 40% of the net proceeds after the sale of the gas. It is in dollars, in the revenue derived from the sale of gas. It is not from the product itself. It is paid only for the services it provides for the government. That's the theory of the service contract. Next. Then you talked lengthily about the transfer of rights. I think the senators have gotten this very well. I understand this now. And this is where control comes in. That's why I cannot understand why there is a conflict here. The thing is, there is no transfer. It has not been approved by government. Therefore, there is no transfer. And you can even say that Chevron, and let me say this, this is just an opinion of mine. Chevron acted maybe slightly, or whatever you call it, slightly in bad faith. Okay? Because there are only two ways, the way I size it up from the service contract. One is transfer to an affiliate. And this is commonly done. As you've said, and the DOE has noted, in the Malampaya history, we transferred from Oxy to Shell, Shell to Texaco, et cetera, et cetera. But most of these transfers are approved by government, plus the transfer is between huge oil companies, proven technology and know-how, proven capital. There is no question about that, So if you transfer it to an affiliate from Chevron to Chevron Philippines to Chevron Malampaya, there should be no problem because the T is the mother company. The government recognizes that, you know. So, and that the other way is the transfer to a third party. Transfer to affiliate is almost automatic, you know, except for submission of some documents. But this can be, and I'll explain it much later. The transfer to any third party, that's the more, I think this deal is a transfer to a third party. So it should still go to government approvals. Next. Next. Okay, there was some numbers mentioned before. Let me give you some numbers, and this is based on press releases, etc., from PNOC in their annual reports. According to PNOC, their 10%, the revenue from their 10% participating interest in Malampaya amounted to 3.9 billion in 2017, 4.8 in 2018, and 4.9 in 2019. Based on that, if that's the 10% of PNOC, then the 40% of the contractor group will be this 3.9 plus 17.5 plus 17.5, which is 39 million for 2017. The 60% take of government, and this was asked by Senator Lacson earlier, is now ranges from 58.5 to 72 to 73 billion a year. No, now I might be off, by several scale here, but all I'm showing is the scale of magnitude on what we're talking about. Okay, and what we may lose by agreeing to this arrangement. Therefore, at 45%, if this is correct, earns about 17 to 22 billion pesos. I note down here that this year, with the pandemic in, SMIC of Schumart of SM, the net income is first 9 months of 2020 is 15 billion. If PNOC gets this 45% instead for the people of the Philippines, it will be bigger than SMIC this year. That's how big it is. Next. Next slide, please. Next slide. And so this is the amount of money you will lose for the people. If you are not serious, we can lose this much. Okay, so I earlier opened up with a statement. Okay, let me go back to this. Let me explain this. This is my interpretation, and this is what we've been talking about. Okay, the current service contractors are in the blue shaded thing, the three guys: Chevron Malampaya, LLC, Specs, who is the operator, and PNOC EC. Okay, Specs, the operator, his mother company is Shell. He reports directly to Shell. Okay, Chevron Malampaya, LLC, under here, is 100% owned, I guess, by Chevron Philippines, who in turn is under Chevron, the big mother. On the other hand, PNOC EC is a subsidiary of PNOC and is 100% owned by RP government. The three guys are the service contractors. Okay? And let me explain that you're right, Senator Gatchalian. The capacity and the qualifications, the technical qualifications and know-how of this in front, assigned as service contractors, emanate from the mother company, from the bigger company, as any other company, Toyota Philippines, they're the local guys here, but the big company is back in Japan, and when you make a deal with Toyota Philippines here, you're making a deal and confident that this guy is backed up by mother company there, and that they have the wherewithal to service your cars, etc., etc. The same thing is here. If you look at Chevron Malampaya office here, as explained by the earlier lady resource speaker, you can count. I can guarantee you can count by the number of your fingers the employees here in Chevron Malampaya right now. And so it is not the guy and the government, because of its control, understands this, and under section 11 or the transfer rights allows it, because we know it's backed up by the experience up in the mother company. But what happened after this? After the Udena deal, next. So after that, here we go. Chevron Malampaya was bought up. Back one, please. Yeah. As you can see, the transaction, the blue contractors remain the same. It's still Chevron Malampaya, still specs as operator, and PNOC EC. But look to your left. Udena Malampaya paid Chevron Philippines $565 million or so to own 100% of Chevron Malampaya, who is the signatory in or designed service contractor. So what Udena is saying now, that there was no change here. If you look at the blue, the company is covered in blue. It did not change from the before situation, and therefore there's nothing to ask approval from the DOE, under Section 11, because there was no request for an affiliate or a transfer to a third party. It's still the same, guys. But the ownership to the left has changed, As you noted, Senator Gatchalian, Udena Malampaya was only formed in 2019. Of course, that is the mother company is Udena Corporation. So this is how I see it, and this is how I to believe now after hearing everybody else in this hearing. Next. In other words, I'm saying that because of government control in the service contract, they can always, they have to have approval on this, on whether Udena, Chevron Malampaya under Udena is qualified as a service contractor. They should not question the commercial arrangement. The commercial arrangement is okay. Legally, it is. Anybody can buy any company. But is that company now owned by Udena qualified to be a service contractor? That's the question. Forget about the commercial arrangement. It is correct. It is legal. But will the government, in its effort to discover and develop oil and gas in the Philippines, will it be better off with a service contract held by Udena? That's the question. So we looked at the background of Udena versus Chevron. And here's what you see. There is no, and you're correct, Senator Gatchalian. And the information is that they never owned or operated a service contract, an exploration service contract. They never, there is never a record in there. This is from Wikipedia. Never, none. And as I've said, can't get any information on the Udena Malampaya. But look at Chevron. There's no question. The Chevron Philippines and Chevron Malampaya, they're just the companies representing the big Chevron, and that's how big companies operate, for tax purposes perhaps, or for organizational ease worldwide. That's how they will structure their operations in different parts of the world. But the key is Chevron Mother, where all the technical know-how and the capital is coming from. Next. Next. So here I am comparing. We were discussing, Senator Lacson was discussing, what if PNOC takes over? I was a little disappointed when the president of PNOC said that they won't be ready until another 10 years, in which case we have failed big, in that respect with PNOC. I think they can, because they now have the people, and as ASEC Pulido said, there are several numerous engineering and operating groups, either in Houston or in Singapore, and they are all very qualified to operate, to run, a production operation. So, PNOC can perhaps do that, but more so if we have a long-term plan for PNOC, where we hold the 45% now, add it to the 10%, and then in earnest train and learn from Shell for the next 4 years. If I remember right, the service contract has a training clause, the intent of which was to train Filipino engineers and Filipino geologists to be able to take over operations. And that's another thing that we need to take with the DOE. We'll have to check if the contractors are abiding by that term, by the requirement of the service contract. But I think 4 years is long enough for PNOC to plan, to make their plans, not independently, but with some strong group of operator to be able to ready to take over Shell, the operation. But it can be done. Okay. So with that, I think we have answered. These are the questions that come into mind, that we need to make sure that we are happy with the answers. Did we exercise full control? Was due process followed? This is very important. Exercise full control. How did this? That's why I'm saying that Chevron, in a way, has some, element of bad faith in them. If Chevron, who is the service contractor now, plans to sell it to somebody, he should have been talking to the owner, to the government, and saying, hey, guys, I plan to sell this, and this is the guy I'm talking to. Will this be good? He's still operating under the service contract when he was selling this thing. And that's where government control comes in. In that case, Chevron did not honor that. He made a deal with Udena, and let Udena take care of, whatever is happening here. That's why I say that there is a tinge of bad faith because probably Chevron knows that, hey, you will not get approved. Okay? So, did we maximize economic benefits for the nation? If it goes to Udena, I just showed you, if you allow PNOC to take over that, then we earn an additional 17 to 20 billion a year. So magkano ang utang natin sa Philippine Red Cross for COVID-19? Bayaran ka agad dyan. The key here, guys, is risk. You know, when these companies entered first for exploration, they took risk that if they come up with dry holes, they could come up with nothing. They will not be reimbursed. A good example of this is Exxon. They drilled 4 wells in the Sulu Sea, found a little gas, $400 million worth. They left and pulled out. Nothing. That's the kind of risk that these guys, Chevron and Oxy and Shell before took, you know. And that's the reason why we are also, and that's also the reason why we are rewarding them with a fee, a service fee of 40% of the net proceeds, you know. So my point is this: if Chevron wants to leave, he doesn't own the oil, he doesn't own any facilities. In other words, he is a paid service guy from the government. He is paid in cash from the 40%. So if you want to, we don't want you to leave. I'm not driving you up. I'm not kicking you out. You stay. But if you want to go, you go. Then I will get another service contractor who will provide the service for me and who I will pay for 40% of the net proceeds. That's my point. However, I agree that you need a legal opinion on that. Okay? So I think, you know, Udena is definitely not qualified, and to maximize benefits for the people, whatever arrangement you need to make, give it to PNOC, you know, and then put the right people in PNOC to be able to train themselves and run this thing in 4 years' time. Then that will be the start of PNOC becoming big, just like Petronas and Pertamina and Petro Vietnam. Petro Vietnam is now so big, we are 25 years ahead of them. But they have done it right. They have grown big. They are now operating in 6 countries, you know, while we stay put here. So I said, that's my presentation, Mr. Chairman, and I hope I explained some things to you. But I'm open to questions if you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed, Senator Marcos, were you raising your hand?
Oh, no. I was actually just agreeing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Marcos. We have other resource persons who are here with us. Let me call on Attorney Dimagiba. Ed will ask questions later on. No? We'll just cover the other resource persons. Attorney Vic Dimagiba.
Okay. Chair, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity to speak. No? First, on personal note, medyo nostalgia sa akin yung subject matter ng hearing mo dahil when you talk about Presidential Decree 87, that's where I started my career in the energy sector. No? So, after hearing Mr. Manyalak, lalo pa ako na nostalgia. Anyway, I will not comment on the Udena, Malampaya, Chevron buy-in or farm-in. I just want to reiterate, Mr. Chairman, on the matter of policy. The Supreme Court had recently institutionalized what it calls a competitive selection process. No? And this policy and this doctrine was initially implemented in the area of the distribution utility in seeking new power supply agreement. And so the rules and regulations are now in place. And bottom line, as you said earlier, I always like whenever you put consumers at the top of all your investigation in subject matters like this. And the bottom line is to find the least cost, right? Having said that, I think it's about time that the Department of Energy should institutionalize the competitive selection process in all sectors of the energy industry. Like, for example, the divestment of the Shell refinery. If somebody buys the Shell refinery, then what will be the government mandated selection process? If, for example, Petron finally decides to sell the Petron refinery, then I think government should step in and implement and ask everybody to put in and implement a selection process applicable to that particular industry. At the end, while it is a commercial transaction, I think everybody should bear in mind that we are dealing with an industry that is affected with public interest. When you deal with a resource that Mr. Manyalak earlier said, the Regalian doctrine, meaning everything belongs to state, I think government should, at the very start, put in its mandate to regulate. Wag lang basta sabihin, wala kaming pakialam dyan. Business to business naman yan eh. It's not the case because at the end, those guys will pass on whatever expenses and fees they have spent to the consumers. So I want to reiterate, maybe as the committee will continue its deliberation, this may not be the first one. Siguro, Mr. Chairman, it's about time that we institutionalize the selection process. I know DOE is doing some selection process in selecting a new contract, a new petroleum service contract. They have a bidding process. Siguro i-apply na rin yung bidding process when there is a transfer or an assignment of an interest in a service contract. The same is true with renewable energy. Not everybody should go into renewable energy. I think that we should examine what are the technical and the financial qualifications of those going into renewable energy and the other sectors of the energy industry. And that's the only point I'd like to contribute at this moment, Mr. Chairman, in your hearing, is a policy that will institutionalize what the Supreme Court held. Wag lang sa kuryente, yung competitive selection process, that should apply across the board in the energy industry. Yun lang po. Maraming salamat, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Attorney Vic. Thank you for always looking out for our consumers. And thank you for making sure that at the heart of every discussion, our consumers are always well taken care of. With that, Ed, Mr. Manyalak, I have one question regarding your slide. And this one, this slide in particular. Of course, a straightforward transaction will be a purchase in Chevron Malampaya LLC. But in this case, Udena bought out Chevron Philippines, a layer on top. So I just want to pick your opinion on why this mode of transaction. Because if you were in the shoes of a purchaser, a straightforward will just step into the shoes of Chevron Malampaya. But why go through one corporate layer up?
Ganito yun, Mr. Chairman. Good question. But what you're seeing here is that Chevron Philippines owns 100% of Chevron Malampaya. Okay? So, Udena Malampaya bought Chevron Philippines shares in Chevron Malampaya. Hindi niya binili ang Chevron Philippines. Ang binili ni Udena, yung shares ni Chevron na 100% sa Chevron Malampaya. You get it? Ang binayaran niya si Chevron Philippines for the 100% na yung shares ng Chevron Philippines sa Chevron Malampaya. Hindi niya binili ang Chevron Philippines. Hindi.
Correct. But what my point is, it's another layer up. No, what my point is, why not?
Because in the Chevron structure, they decided by a corporate decision that they will put Chevron Malampaya, who is the signatory in the service contract, under Chevron Philippines. If you will notice, specs, Shell did not do that because there is a Filipina Shell, pero wala dito ang Filipina Shell. Specs operator reports directly to Shell Hague. And you can ask Mr. Paulino on this. Hindi nila pinadaan sa Pilipinas Shell. Ang Chevron, ginawa nila, pinadaan sa Chevron Philippines. So ikaw may-ari. This is just corporate structuring ng malalaking korporasyon on how they will operate in the Philippines, how they will operate in fact, there is a Chevron Holdings somewhere in Asia that handles the accounting, the financing arrangements, etc., of their companies here in Asia. Kaya kung lang ito yung it's the decision of the mother company. For example, sa China, ang exploration doon, merong exploration Southeast China, merong exploration Xinjiang. Isang kumpanya yun, Chevron or Phillips Petroleum, pero tatlong kumpanya yung ginagamit but this just they decided to establish another specific, actually ang tawag lang nila dito is a business unit. It's not even a subsidiary. Chevron Malampaya is not they call it a business unit. Maliit lang to. But who owns who is signatory to the service contract? So ang sinasabi ng Udena, kung titingnan mo ang istruktura ng service contract consortium na yun, wala namang nagpalit. Chevron Malampaya pa rin ang nandyan. Kaya lang ako na may-ari. Pero hindi nagpalit dyan. So ano ang hinihingi kong approval kay DOE? Wala naman akong hinihingi approval dyan. Hindi naman nagpalit eh. Di ba? Yun ang Mr. Senator, yun ang play ni Udena. Yun ang sinasabi ni Ma'am kanina na it's a commercial deal pero hindi nga siya nasa Chevron Malampaya pero empleyado na siya ng Udena ngayon. Pero nandun lang siya, Kaya there is that's why I say there is a tinge of bad faith in the side of Chevron. Okay? Kung alam nilang ganito ang mangyayari at ganito ang ilalaro ni Udena, pumayag siya. Hindi sinabi muna kay DOE sa gobyerno na, guys, ito ang bala ko Gusto ko nang umalis eh. Pinagbibili ko kay Udena at itong gagamitin Chevron. Pwede ba yan? Yun ang ibig kong sabihin. Kaya ang tanong sa DOE, kailan nagpunta o nagpaalam ba sa inyo ang Chevron? Kasi siya ang kadil mo, hindi mo naman kadil si Udena eh. Ang kadil mo si Chevron eh.
But anyway, yep. The reason why I asked, because this slide took my attention, and with the comment of Senator Marcos earlier, obviously there is some sort of a corporate layering, and the law is quite explicit with the entities that forms part of the service contractor.
Right.
So another layer to avoid government approval is go one layer up. But that's why it's important to understand DOE's scope and coverage when it comes to due diligence, because this type of corporate layering can be argued that it does not require government scrutiny.
Correct.
But then again, at the end of if you look at the structure, the beneficial owners have so much control over the operation and the service contract, which again might have detrimental effects to the supply of electricity. So yun po yung that's what I am trying to understand this slide, because like what Senator Marcos earlier said, it's important to understand the beneficial owner, because corporate layering can muddle the decision makers.
Correct.
And we have to understand who are the decision makers.
Yes. Mr. Senator, the argument of Udena is that if government accepted Chevron Malampaya as qualified, well, they haven't changed it. It's still there. So it is qualified. Therefore, I don't need DOE approval. That's their play. But what you guys are saying, Mr. Senator and Senator Ivy, is correct. You know, that throughout the life of Malampaya, we did not look at these lower guys. You know, specs. It's the Shell and the Chevron upstairs that the government was looking at. You know, those are the guys we were attracting to come here in the first place from the very start. You know, because these are the guys who has the money, who covers the technical know, their engineers are worldwide, etc. Those are the guys. This corporate entities down here are affiliates, quote unquote, that were formed by these big corporations as a matter of their organizational strategy in the Philippines. We will run it through a subsidiary or through an affiliate. You know, yun ang mga desisyon nila eh. Pero hindi yun. Ang tinitingnan natin nun, yung sino ba ito? Nung naparito dito, ang naparito dito ay mga presidente ng Chevron at Shell. Yan ang nakipagpirmahan kay President Aquino. You know? Hindi itong ibaba. Kaya ang sabi ko lang, kung ang may-ari na pala yung Udena Malampaya, napagagawa nga lang noong 2019. Walang eksperyensya, walang record. You know? Gaano kahirap magsabi ang DOE na, hindi pwede. Ano pa kailangan mo malaman? Wala talaga. You know? O punta tayo sa Udena Corporation. Ano ang history din nito? Ano ang alam nito sa exploration and production? Wala. You know?
Anyways, we'll hear the other resource persons. We have other resource persons here with us, and I want to open now the floor to any comments from our other resource persons who might want to manifest or comment on any of the discussions. Yes, Ernie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for inviting us. We find the discussion very interesting, but we hope you understand where we're coming from as MAP. What is of utmost importance to business is really to make sure that the operations of the Camago Malampaya Consortium continue and not stop in 2024, because as you very rightly pointed out, number one, it controls the supply of almost one household of every four, which is 25%. But I think what is more important, which your slide points out, Camago Malampaya represents a cheap source of power, being 63 centavos cheaper than fossil fuels. And if Camago Malampaya stops in 2024 without any extension or clear guidelines on what will happen after that, unfortunately, I think the gas plants will have no choice, if you want them to continue operations, to switch to condensate or diesel, which is going to be definitely more expensive than the current cost of power. And we understand that based on previous information, that if they shift to condensate, it's going to cost between 50 to 70 centavos more expensive than any fossil fuel, which again will burden the poor Filipino consumer, and of course, business will suffer. However, Mr. Chair, the point here we're saying is it's important that we have a clear vision of what will happen after 2024. And in that regard, Mr. Chair, I hope you don't mind. You called for a meeting May in May 2018 regarding Camago Malampaya, and the map gave you a position paper outlining 5 points that we wanted to be resolved with respect to the extension in order to provide some clarity as to the vision moving forward. And we understand, based on our discussions in the committee, that none of these 5 items were actually resolved. No? Although, let me just briefly, if you will allow me, Mr. Chair. No? The first two, which was immediate priority, was really to recommend that COA drop their view on taxation against the consortium. How do you expect foreign investors to come in if in the middle of the discussions, all of a sudden, you have an income tax liability being put on by government, which is really changing the rules of the game. And unfortunately, from May 2018 to current, it has not been resolved. No? The second point, Mr. Chair, the Ilian ownership issue or the issue between San Miguel and Pisam has not yet been resolved to our knowledge. And of course, we'd like to find out how this will be resolved because Ilihan controls 1,200 megawatts of power, which are currently being delivered to the consumers. The other points, which are of less priority but of equal importance, is really if there is no clarity as to what will happen after 2024, the bank gas of PNOC, which is close to $50 million, will be gone. And it's very unfortunate because that represents additional revenues for government, including, of course, PNOC. And what happens to the remaining gas over and above the bank gas? We understand that Shell had undertaken some exploratory wells and actually were in a position to expand or to assure the supply of natural gas beyond 2024, provided certain drillings had to be done. No? But again, there has been no clarity with respect to discussions on the extension. And if you will allow me, Mr. Chair, the last two items, there's been some development very recently with respect to developing new gas resources, with the government opening up the service contracts in the disputed area. And of course, last but not least, really the LNG import facilities that currently are being planned both by San Miguel and First Gen or First Class with respect to assuring that there will be sufficient fuel in the event that Camago Malampaya will be shut down. No? And in that regard, Mr. Chair, we would just wish to reiterate, while it's important to resolve this issue on the ownership and transfer, I think what is of major concern to business is to make sure that this cheap source of power and reliable source of power, close to 3,200, will continue to operate beyond 2024. And in that regard, again, Mr. Chair, we wish to thank you for inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernie. We are also, since you mentioned the potential of the service contract, we can go to the discussion of post 2024. No, because as we all know, 2024, the SC38 will end as a contract, and there's also talk that depletion will become a reality. So we also invited the general manager of Shell Pilipinas, Mr. Don Paulino, who is the current operator of the rig and the whole Malampaya project. Don, can you shed light to us the potential of SC38, potential in a sense that are there any more areas to be explored around the current Malampaya and in within the SC38 service area? And then can you also give us a some sort of a description on how we can maximize those potentials in that area, since you operate that service contract, and Shell being the operator of the oil rig as well as the main operator of Malampaya. I know that you have done some preliminary studies, and please share it with us the potential of the service contract in that area.
Mr.
Yes, Senator Lacson.
Indulgence of Mr. Don Paulino. I was able to catch the last portion of your discussion with Ed Manyala, and I just want to be enlightened with by asking this question. You know, what's wrong with a business decision to sell 100% of its shares to a buyer who's willing to purchase those shares? I just want to be enlightened, not for anything. I just want to be enlightened on this. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Senator. No, I was not. What I was saying is that as a legal commercial transaction, there's nothing wrong with Udena buying Chevron Malampaya from Chevron Philippines. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's a commercial transaction between two companies, and they can do that. Now, the question is, when you try to tell me now that since you accepted the Chevron Malampaya as a qualified service contractor, and I just bought it, then it should remain as qualified contractor, right? You don't have to seek approval from anybody, and that's part of the reason why they did not. They were just supplying documents to DOE, but they never, there was not at any point asked for approval, because that was their line of thinking. It's not the commercial transaction I was questioning. They can do that, but it's now upon DOE to determine whether this can remain as the service contractor, knowing that Udena, the mother, or the subsidiary of the mother, is not qualified. It just was formed 2 years ago or a year ago. So yun ang posisyon ko, na para lang makailag sa approval ng gobyerno, ng control ng gobyerno, dinaan sa legal yung transaction eh. Dinaan doon, pero daw sinabi na, hindi naman namin pinalitan yung pangalan niyan, nandiyan pa rin. Pareho pa rin yan, aprobado na dati yan. So anong problema? Wala. Okay lang. Dapat aprubahan ng DOE. And that's the reason why I'm saying that there is some tinge of bad faith in some parties involved in this.
Yeah.
Alam nila na hindi pwede yun. Pero, at alam, siguro, we have to ask Chevron na kung alam mo ganun ang gagawin, ganun ang strategy ni Udena. First place, kailan mo pinaalam kay DOE na nagbebenta ka na? Di ba? Kahit ni si Chevron Philippines, kailan mo alam na nakikipag-deal ka na pala kay Udena para mabili yung business unit mo? Kailan pa yan? At bakit hindi mo sa amin sinasabi? Ako yung Sa akin kami kontratang service contract eh. You know? So yun ang mga itatanong. Ngayon, I think DOE is in the right track by concentrating on the qualifications, technical, know-how of the owner. Dahil wala naman talaga yung Chevron Malampaya. Their qualification emanates from their higher mother company, you know. So now the job of DOE is to determine whether this, which is now owned by Udena Malampaya, is a viable service contractor that has the technical, the funding, and the know-how. The important thing is the know-how. You know, tama ho kayo eh. Kung umalis si Chevron, ay si Shell, di dapat kung qualified siya, may kapalit ka na kaagad. You know? And sasabihin lang nun, Mr. Senator, is pwede naman akong kumuha rin ng kontratista nung engineer na madami dyan. Yan na magpapatakbo. Kung yun din lang gagawin, ba't hindi na lang gobyerno ang gumawa? See, yun ang posisyon ko. It's a legal transaction, I think, commercial. You know, nagbilihan ng kumpanya. Pero now we go to the service contract. You know, they have to apply or ask for approval because there's a change of ownership of the guy who is listed as the contractor. Yung Chevron Malampaya, iba na may-ari. So kailangan tanungin yung may-ari, ano ka ba?
Yeah, thank you, Ed. I'm sorry, Mr. Chief, earlier, kanina, because I had to prepare for a 3 o'clock session. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lacson. Thank you. Mr. Don, can you share with us the potential of Service Contract 38?
Yeah. Good afternoon, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Ping Lacson, and Senator Amy Marcos. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be able to share some insights from the operator perspective. But at the same time, I just want to highlight how proud I am to be part of this joint venture, given the earlier presentation that Senator Gatchalian have presented in terms of how Malampaya and how important Malampaya is to the country, from supplying 20% of the energy supply to providing government revenues and to helping in sustaining the energy of the country. I also want to share that for the last 2 decades, as a joint venture and in partnership with our regulator, the DOE, we've been really working hard so we can sustain 40% of the energy needs of the country, but at the same time, develop the local capability. And I just want to highlight that Malampaya, as an organization, if you look at it, it is run by Filipinos for the Filipinos. And back in 2015, we've also have seen the evidence of that development by actually having our first Philippine-made platform. It was built in Subic. If you see pictures of Malampaya, it was a red and yellow platform. That was built in Subic, built in by Filipino engineers, by our Fluor Philippines engineer. And it was painted, welded, and really managed by the Filipinos. So in that 2 decades, I have to say that we have really developed the expertise, because when I joined Malampaya back in 2000, we're still full of expats. And now we are in a position to do this on our own, and more independent of our parent companies. In fact, just to give you some touch point, we've been given Asset of the Year award by the Shell Group, among other assets. So we have won it twice, back in 2015 and 2019. This is among 25, 30 assets around the globe of Shell. And most recently, we also had an external recognition called the Company of the Year by the International Business Awards group. So, and the reason I'm sharing this is because I represent the Filipinos that are part of the joint venture. And on a day-to-day basis, we continue to be proud in helping the country. Now, the discussion is really about what's the future for Malampaya. What we've been doing in the last couple of months, or in fact, the last couple of maybe around 8 weeks now, is we've been really working closely with our regulator, the Department of Energy, to actually talk about license extension. And the reason we want to have that discussion is really about what can we do further as a joint venture moving forward to look into the opportunities around Service Contract 38. Because whilst the potential in Service Contract 38 is not that big compared to the original size of Malampaya, we see some potential in further extending the life of Malampaya to actually allow us to bridge future exploration opportunity that can or may not happen across the West Philippine Sea. So we're seeing some development in the Camago field, but we're also seeing some further development that we can do within the Malampaya field itself. Now, what we need to do is really do the further studies associated with that, together with our joint venture partners, and at the same time, with approval of the DOE, through the license extension, start doing some investment to allow us to actually start doing drilling. So the step that we need to take is really do the studies, evaluate the seismic that we have, which is get the data that we currently have, and then make judgments on where to drill to allow us to actually really find the potential. Because, senators, until we drill, we would not know whether really there's gas or oil underneath. That's the challenge of being an operator. Unlike other businesses like manufacturing and energy, you know where that source is coming from. In our case, we cannot see 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers down underneath the sea and underneath the actual land itself. We have to rely on seismic, which is really bombarding the seabed with ultrasonic sounds. We have to rely on sampling and other techniques. And the only time we can actually verify it is actually when we drill it. And that's the reason why, for us to be able to do that, we also need some clarity in terms of the fiscal terms, but at the same time, the longevity of the contract we will have with the government. That's why the license extension is quite important for us. Maybe I'll pause there, senators, and wait for your feedback or questions.
Don, let me just flash a slide from DOE earlier. And this is information from DOE. And this is the areas that covers Service Contract 38. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And these are the different fields within Service Contract 38, correct?
Yeah.
And the potential is 1,607 billion cubic feet.
Yes, sir.
Correct. So in other words, if the contract will be extended, there's a potential of extracting 1,607 billion cubic feet.
Yeah. So, sir, so I'll just step back a bit before I answer your question directly, because in the exploration phase of an oil company or a service contract, you need to think about what you call a probability of success. I understand ASEC and the USEC mentioned that earlier on. I'll go back to my point earlier on that the challenge with exploration is you really don't know what's underneath. So as geologists, as engineers, we would rely on the data that we have and assign probability of success. Now, in this particular case, what we're seeing is 1.6 trillion cubic feet of gas. Yes, but the ranges of of success across this field varies from 20%, maybe on an area like Camago, it will be around 80%. But we will not know that until we actually do the drilling. And that's the reason why, as a joint venture, what we need to do is really have a very concise study or a deep study around this, make judgment. And I've used the word judgment because it relies experience, it requires expertise, and then make a decision on which will be prioritizing across these fields.
But just to give the body sort of like a good grasp, no? Malampaya is about 3 trillion cubic feet. Is that correct?
Yes.
So the
Yes.
potential is half of Malampaya within service contract 38. So the
Yeah.
potential is only half of Malampaya. Nevertheless, it's still a potential, no? But it's only half.
It's still, sir, and if you really put in the probability of success in each of this, it will be much lower.
Okay. So but the key, I want to understand, Don, the key is to extend the contract you mentioned earlier, because the contractors will not risk anything if they don't extend the contract. Is that correct?
Yeah, sir. Because I guess to respond to that is in the end, as mentioned by Mr. Manyalak earlier on, as service contractors, we will be doing all the investment. So government doesn't not invest anything in all of this. So when we do a drill, that particular investment of around 100 million, 150 million dollars per well is actually put in by each of the service contractor in accordance to their equity share. Now, there will be a possibility that we will not be able to find any gas at all. And as a result of that 150 million will just go to the ether and it will be non-recoverable in the end. And that's the reason why the license extension is important for us, is that in the event that we find something and we actually don't know the exact volume around that, we have a way to recover the initial investments that we have made. And it's not possible to actually do the exploration right now without the license extension, because it will take some time to actually do the actual seismic, the exploration, the drilling, and the eventual production of the gas. And therefore, we need the period beyond the license extension or beyond the license to actually do the recovery of the risk that we have taken as service contractors.
All right. Definitely, no, because of the risk that you'll be undertaking, it's important that there is a longer term for the contract. No, that I understand that, and that's why it's also important to look at that perspective, because part of the recommendation of the business community or the business sector is to have certainty in the contract and to explore more or to drill more, and this goes hand in hand. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I just want to also pick your brains on this, no, because this was shown in the slide of DOE, no? The what's left on the existing well, and it was shown here. Let me just flash in the slide. So this one, Don, no. So I think we should just be looking at the fourth column, the total EUR from July to the end of life of the well. Is that,
Yes, sir.
that's what we should be looking at, correct?
Yes, sir.
So in other words, the remaining, if we took a conservative stand, we should be looking at the mid, and we should be just looking at what PNOC look at the study of the PNOC. We're looking at 623 billion cubic feet left until the end of life of the well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But then again, we have to extend the contract, no, to be in order to recover that.
Mhm.
So on top of the 1,600 BCF earlier potential, we can still recover 623 BCF until the end of the field.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so what you're seeing right now are based on the data and the studies by each of the joint venture partners, because as joint venture partners, we need to make our own assessment. We are not allowed to actually, in fact, share the data behind that because of competition law, but at the same time, it's our safeguarding as organization to actually assess. And what you're seeing here is actually almost an alignment of views in terms of the volume that is left on the ground. Now, what I want to highlight here, Senator Gatchalian, is if you look on Malampaya as a reservoir, Malampaya as a reservoir is it's a high performing reservoir. In fact, what we're expecting with this recovery is we will be recovering greater than 80% or 80% of the what initially the potential of the reservoir is. And that is really quite a good performance. If you look at it from a global level, some of the wells that we have in the North Sea, we will only be able to recover 60%, 70%. But with Malampaya it's this volume. And it shows you the testament. It's also a testament to what the joint venture has been doing in the past years to really make Malampaya as efficient as possible and allow us to actually produce as much gas to provide the Filipinos I would say the sustainable and renewable, not renewable, sustainable and cheaper gas prices. So yes, sir, this is roughly within the estimates that we as a joint venture have made independently.
Thank you, Don, and I'm very proud of what you have accomplished in the oil rig. A all Filipino team is truly a feat. I've been to the oil rig, and it's very complicated. It's one asset that you need a lot of technical know-how to operate that, and achieving a 100% Filipino team is really an honor and a feat that we should commend, and I commend you for spearheading that. And that's why I hope Shell will. I've been reading in the news that Shell is considering to exit the Philippines. I hope you don't exit the Philippines. We need your technical expertise. We need your experience. And that's why I wanted to understand the potential of SE38. And we can see, we can still extract half, no? Hopefully, of Malampaya in SE38. And we can only do that if you have global experts and global oil and gas companies operating that. And that's why I was quite disturbed when I heard that Shell is also exiting. No, I think we need, and my appreciation of this industry, it's a global industry. There are some industries that we have to admit it's a global industry, and we need global experts with global supply chain, global knowledge to operate in our shores. So that's why I was quite disturbed when I heard that news. Nevertheless, yeah, again, no, congratulations for developing an all Filipino team running a very complicated asset in our country. With that, I would like to open the floor to. Yes, Don, go ahead.
If I can just interject, because you've highlighted and recognized the Filipinos on the platform. I also just want to add the operators and team we have at the gas plant, and the people also inspecting the 504-kilometer pipeline, because really that's the whole Malampaya asset from the platform going down to the gas plant that we have in Tabangawin. In fact, all through that value chain, we have really put in a lot of effort together with our partner contractors to actually Philippinize it, and that includes some of our helicopter pilots, some of the people manning the boats and the supply vessels. So this is not really just a joint venture initiative, but our partner contractors have also joined us in actually making sure that we continue to be part of powering the progress in the Philippines. Now, the other thing I want to highlight is that yes, Shell right now is exploring its options to divest its share in Malampaya, and this is really driven at a very global level. And as you know, the energy industry has been challenged in two ways: one, by the price, and the other one by the demand. And what I want to assure the public and yourselves, senators, is that our intention is to really look for somebody who is technically, financially, and somebody who can really sustain the operation. And that's why, together with the joint venture, we continue to be interested in license extension. And we've also been assured by our parent company that this is not a Philippine exit. We still have a lot of businesses here in the Philippines. So we have the largest business operations in Shell here, with around 4,000 people, which is what we call the SPO. And we have we still have the downstream, which is the retail network, which is composed of more than 1,000 retail sites and 700 people right now. And we continue to, at this point, we still hear aspects. So if you look at it, within Shell companies in the Philippines, we are around 5,000 people here in the Philippines, supporting in powering the country, whether during the pandemic, but even during the most challenging times in the Philippines. Just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Don. We'll open the floor to the other resource persons if you have any comments or reactions to what we have been discussing earlier on. Any comments? Senator Marcos, any more comments? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Attorney Rivera of Pilarica. Attorney Rivera of Pilarica po, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Attorney Rivera, go ahead. Yes, go ahead, Attorney Rivera.
I think that it's high time for government to reveal its intention as to whether it will extend the service contract with the current operator, or subject the Malampaya to a competitive selection process. As of now, I'm referring to the recovery mechanism of the service contractors. The OPEX are passed on for the current year as an expense, but the CAPEX is amortized or depreciated during the economic life of the asset. But after deducting OPEX and CAPEX, the service contractor is entitled to 40%, and the national government 60%. There are two phases of government here: the national government and the PNOC as a GOCC. The national government gets 60%, but on the other, in addition to that, PNOC, a GOCC is also entitled to 10% of the share of the service contractor. 10%. I think that there was a presentation a while ago, and I fully appreciate the presentation. The question also is that when Udena decided to purchase the shares of this Chevron, does Udena expect that the service contract will be extended? Because the service contractor is supposed to recover its investment or expected within the term of the service contract. That's why the service contractor assume a certain degree of risk. But if they make good, then they get the 40%. of the net income. That's why my question, Mr. Chair, is that what is the plan of government now, the national government? Will it rebid or subject the Malampaya to a competitive selection process, as mentioned by Attorney Dimagiba, or explore the possibility of extending the service contract? These are the two options of government, so that the prospective investors shall also be guided accordingly. Because of course, the new investor, like for example, if the service contract will not be extended by government, if the of course, what will happen to Udena, its investment? Because the presupposition is that Udena will expect to recover its investment. In the transferee or the transferor are expected to recover their investment within the service contract period. They do not expect that the service contract will be extended. That is always the presupposition, if even of the largest businessman. They will assume there is always that possibility that will not be extended. Like in the case of Maynilad, for example. Can we equate this in the case of Maynilad? The first operator of Maynilad actually was the Lopez Group with the foreign partner. Eventually, it was rebided to Manny Pangilinan and DMCI. But in this particular case, there is some distinction because Udena will purchase or has purchased the share of Chevron, which is a party to the concession to the consortium. It's a party to consortium. It's a party to the consortium, and that Udena will be stepping into the shoes of Chevron, but it will not be Chevron. It will not appear as Chevron. Actually, what will happen actually, Udena will be a party to the consortium because the 45% share which was sold by Chevron, wala na yun. Wala na sa picture po yan. Hindi iba yung Maynilad po. Iba sa Maynilad kasi yung Maynilad nandun lagi. Kung sino man lang ang gusto mag-rebid in the future, Maynilad pa rin. And the other party will be MWSS. But here, mawawala na itong ano eh. Kaya dito is that it put the shares, o then na put the shares of Chevron as a vehicle to enter into the consortium. So much so that Udena will be a partner in the consortium. It will be a partner. Hindi na gagamitin kasi iba po yung Maynilad eh. Itong DMCI, Material Pacific, ginamit ang Maynilad. Dito, sa pananaw ko, Mr. Chair, hindi gagamitin ang Udena ang pangalan ng pangalan kasi mag-exit na itong si Chevron eh. Mawawala, kaya papasok ngayon si Udena as a partner to the consortium. Yan po lang tanong
Okay
ko,
po.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Attorney. Maraming salamat for your 2 cents worth of analysis. Thank you very much. Any comments from the body before we move on?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Larry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just like to share some few insights on that may help the discussion also. Meralco also recognizes the strategic value of an indigenous source of energy like the Malampaya gas field. And Meralco, along with NTC, in the 1990s provided the guaranteed or take-or-pay market for the gas-to-power projects that underpin the Malampaya project. Currently, while natural gas from Malampaya accounts for 29% of power generation in Luzon, it accounts for 50% of Meralco to its captive market. And 4 of the 5 power plants that use Malampaya for fuel have power supply contracts with Meralco. But in terms of being an indigenous energy source made by the Australia-based International Energy Consultants when it conducted a study for Meralco in 2012 on comparative power prices. The IEC at the time noted that Malampaya gas, while indigenous, is priced wholly in US dollars and is indexed to a substantial extent to world crude oil prices. In these aspects, being priced in foreign currency and having prices that move up or down with world oil prices, Malampaya actually acts like an imported fuel. The field does provide a measure of energy security. At the same time, however, we would like to note that the Luzon grid has experienced generation adequacy concerns when supply from Malampaya is temporarily halted or restricted during periods of extended maintenance works on the platform or the pipeline. Malampaya's large share in the power supply mix of Luzon implies that when it is on maintenance, on forced outage, or when there is gas restriction, there may be instances of yellow or red alerts in the Luzon grid, resulting in price spikes in the WSM, especially when the grid does not have enough reserve capacity to ensure continuity of power supply. Thus, in the ongoing discussions regarding Malampaya supply, we respectfully recommend that pricing be reviewed, first to reduce exposure to foreign exchange, and second to world oil prices so that the country may more fully benefit from the indigenous nature of the fuel. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Larry. And you opened up a very good point, no, on the pricing of Malampaya gas, no, and we admit that there are surrounding issues, and we have to look at the pricing mechanism very closely, whether the pricing is fair to our consumers and whether we are maximizing the indigenousness of Malampaya. Because obviously, if pricing will not reflect that, we will not be enjoying the benefits of indigenous sources. So with that, I would like to close by manifesting that it's not the aim of this committee to create uncertainty in the transactions surrounding Malampaya. On the contrary, we want certainty in the transactions. And at the end, we want certainty in the delivery of electricity to our consumers. That's why we are tasking the DOE to look into this type of conflicts that has already risen out of this transaction. In fact, we recommend to DOE to come up with clarificatory circulars. And we also recommend to DOE to suggest to the legislature on what amendments we should take in order to avoid this type of uncertainty. Admittedly, PD 87 is a catalyst law during those times, but we also have learned so many things, no, throughout its life, and it's probably about time to see if we can improve on the law, we can clarify some of the provisions, and even recommend to come up with a new oil and gas law. So this is what we require of DOE. Number one is to study the possibility of coming up with a clarificatory circular. Number two, recommend to the Senate what improvements we can do in PD 87 and other laws that govern the oil and gas industry. And on the transaction itself, we require DOE to submit to us a timetable on their review. Honestly, when I was reviewing the documents that were submitted to us, there was no talk on the timetable of the review. In fact, it is only first time that we have heard that this type of review is being undertaken. It's not our intention to pass judgment on the new buyer, on Udena. We will leave that to the experts, to DOE, to determine. The DOE has a mechanism, a formal mechanism, as well as a very rigid format and framework to review whether a contractor is capable or not. We will leave that to the experts to do it. But what we want is a timetable, how to move forward. And what we want is to see the basis of the review, legal basis of the review. So we will require that from DOE, and we will give DOE a generous time frame.
Senator?
Yes, Belinda, go ahead.
May I speak for a moment, just to uh, uh, put our position clear, if I may. If I may.
Yes, go ahead. Yes,
Yes.
go ahead.
So I'd just like to say that the CMLC UC38 shares the pride of the consortium for the accomplishments of the Malampaya asset. This was made possible by the close collaboration between the government, or the DOE, and the consortium. And we can concur with the committee and Mr. Pantangco of the MAP that the issues facing energy security is of utmost importance. And this is resolve the COA issue, resolve Ilihan dispute, the bank gas, open up exploration, and enable LNG importation. Please note that the UC38 since March 12 have demonstrated that we continue to exercise our duties and responsibilities as non-operator. We have supported the license extension effort of the consortium, and more importantly, we continue to support the operator in continuing the safe and reliable operations of the Malampaya facilities. UC38, like SPECS, is an all-Filipino team. To be more specific, it's all Filipina team. We are highly qualified and trained and technically experienced in the oil and gas industry. We will continue to support the consortium partners and the government in pursuing solutions to address issues involving energy security by continuing our focus in developing the Malampaya asset to provide indigenous, clean, and reliable energy. Yun lang po ang gusto pong sabihin, and on behalf of CMLC and UC38, thank you for inviting us.
Thank you, Belinda, and thank you for manifesting that. Again, it's not our goal to create uncertainty in the transaction. In fact, our goal is to create certainty now and years to come. And like I said in my opening statement, the primordial concern are the consumers, making sure that the consumers will receive 24/7 electricity at the least cost manner. So that is the concern, and that's why we want to understand the flurry of transactions that is coming out, because we have laws and regulations that govern all of this transaction, and those laws are meant to create a stable environment in the power sector. But admittedly, during the course of the hearing, I see that we can still improve a lot. We can make improvements in the law, and we have to tackle some of the issues that is creating that uncertain environment. With that, that's why I'm tasking DOE to study the possibility of issue a subsequent circular on sale and purchase of interest, as well as recommendations to the legislature on how to improve on PD 87 or clarify some of the provisions. With that, I'm also requiring DOE to, and this is from Senators Ping Lacson and Senators Amy Marcos, from DOE and PNOC to submit to us records on gross income / proceeds, less operating expense, and division between national government and Malampaya and the Malampaya Consortium. And to DOE, suggest, yeah, I mentioned this earlier. And lastly, to the DOE to submit to us a timetable on the review and also their legal basis on which they use their decision to trigger the review. To DOE and PNOC, please submit to us those documents on or before November 17, 2020. All right. So any last comments? Attorney Faye, do you have any last comments? I saw you logging in from PCC.
Good afternoon, Senator. Well, as you well know, the PCC cleared the acquisition in this of this transaction way back in early this year. It was observed by the Mergers and Acquisitions Office of the PCC that there were no horizontal or vertical, how do you say, integration that was that was possible or that would result in any kind of foreclosure in the market, precisely because the purchaser here would then is or UC Malampaya is actually owned by Udena, that has no real how do you say there would be no real effect in the market should they enter this business or exploration business. So we observed also in our merger review that yes, as stated earlier, just to confirm that the UC Malampaya was created mainly and precisely. I apologize for my dogs.
I think those are your famous dogs.
Yes, they're multiplying, Mr. Senator, sir.
This is not the first time your dogs have participated in our hearings.
Yes, sir.
I suggest you register them next time to the committee secretary so we can recognize them.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I apologize again. They like participating in the Senate hearings. Sorry, just to emphasize again, we noted in our merger review that UC Malampaya was created mainly to purchase the shares in Chevron to undertake this this project or this business opportunity, and we only found we only made a what we would possibly call a minute resolution on in this case because again the holdings of Udena in either Phoenix or their other possible related businesses will not result in any kind of horizontal or vertical integration that will result in foreclosure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, attorney. And please submit to us that resolution or that study that you made, or any document that pertain to the result of your resolution, so that we will be guided accordingly on the logic of that clearance that you have issued to Udena, or to this transaction for that matter.
We will, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. With that, Senator Aimee, any last words before we suspend? If
No,
not,
I was
then-
just going to. I was going to inquire if you're going to. I was just going to inquire if you're going to have a succeeding hearing on the same matter.
Yes, Senator Aimee, because we have some submissions from DOE and PNOC, and one of the more important submissions here, the timeline of the review, the process of the review, also some recommendations for legislative actions such as amendments or clarificatory amendments on PD 87 and other submissions that Senator Lacson and yourself required of them. So we will have another hearing. We will inform the body of the date of that hearing. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for your participation and for your transparency for that matter, because we've received a lot of documents from DOE, PNOC, and the other entities. And thank you very much for your time. So we will suspend this hearing for now, and we will inform you of the next hearing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ASEC Pulido and Yusek Marcos. And of course, to Senator Marcos and to Senator Lacson. Thank you very much. This meeting is hereby suspended.